Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. But now that an attempted murder charge was in play, who would still stand by a criminal? Attempted murder? Matsumoto Kiyonaga's gaze darkened as he quickly scanned the room. His eyes locked onto his daughter. Seated, safe, and in good health. He let out a quiet sigh of relief. Then, his gaze fell upon Toshihiko, lying motionless on the floor, and his expression turned grim. Of course, he didn't believe that Toshihiko was targeting the second daughter of the Suzuki Zaibatsu. The true target of this man's revenge was undoubtedly him, Matsumoto Kiyonaga. And he had aimed at his daughter to carry it out. But upon seeing the situation inside the room, Matsumoto Kiyonaga felt reassured. Sanoko stood there, outwardly furious but unharmed. He immediately understood. It was an orchestrated plan between his daughter and the Suzuki heiress. Having realized this, he decided not to interfere. Murder? That man actually committed such a deranged act? Matsumoto Kiyonaga's face darkened even further. I never expected him to take advantage of my daughter's feelings, nor to use her connection with Miss Suzuki to target her in such a vile manner. Mugure. Yes, sir. Mugure-jun immediately stepped forward from behind him. Handcuff this scumbag who dared to attempt murder and take him straight to Metropolitan Police Headquarters for interrogation. Also, notify the Takasugi Zaibatsu and Suzuki Zaibatsu. They are both required to report to the station. Understood. Mugure-jun glanced at Takasugi Toshihiko lying on the floor. He found it hard to believe that this man would have the audacity to target the second daughter of the Suzuki family. However, targeting Superintendent Matsumoto's daughter was a different matter. It would have been difficult to predict whether Suzuki Sanoko would attend this wedding, but the bride, as the wedding's central figure, was guaranteed to be present. So, it was clear, Toshihiko's true target had been Matsumoto Kiyonaga's daughter. Yet, in this moment, they were formally identifying Takasugi Toshihiko as the culprit behind the attempted murder of Ms. Suzuki. Though Mugure-jun had an inkling of the truth, he didn't see Takasugi Toshihiko as innocent. After all, if this man hadn't truly harbored murderous intent, this situation wouldn't have unfolded at all. Stepping forward, Mugure-jun pulled out a pair of handcuffs and secured them around Takasugi Toshihiko's wrists. Miss Hayasaka, do you have evidence of this man's crime? Of course, she replied. Mugure-jun briefly paused after securing the handcuffs. He had already expected as much. This was a trap carefully laid for Toshihiko. But if he hadn't actually intended to kill, he wouldn't have fallen into it. He had no one to blame but himself. Hayasaka retrieved the camcorder she had prepared in advance. Superintendent Matsumoto, this was originally meant to record the bride's wedding, but unexpectedly, it captured the groom poisoning Miss Suzuki's drink. The poisoned target was the lemon tea can Miss Suzuki had been drinking from. Please take this into evidence. Of course. Matsumoto Kiyonaga accepted the camcorder, though his facial muscles twitched with anger. He truly hadn't expected Toshihiko to be so ruthless. This time, it had been too close. That man had almost succeeded. Chapter 161, Clown. Today, the police arrested a groom for poisoning someone at a wedding. Because the incident was quite serious, the news was reported on the evening broadcast. Of course, the report only mentioned the groom who committed the poisoning. The bride's involvement and the identity of the victim were deliberately omitted. The implication was clear. The details of those involved were being kept confidential. But in reality, it was an intentional suppression of information. Even the media were downplaying the incident between the bride and the poisoned individual. After all, the culprit was the groom, which meant the bride was implicated as well. Especially considering that the bride was the daughter of a police inspector, this part of the news needed to be concealed even further. As for the identity of the poisoned victim, it had to remain hidden. She was the second daughter of the Suzuki Zaibatsu and the future heir of the conglomerate. If the heirs of major corporate families had to face assassination attempts not from internal power struggles but from rival conglomerates, the implications would be catastrophic. If the families collectively decided to flee the country, the situation would become even more problematic. After all, if the business environment within their own country was so dangerous that heirs faced poisoning attempts from competing conglomerates, wouldn't every conglomerate's heir have to start worrying for their lives? Thus, certain matters had to be suppressed. On the other hand, the Takasugi Zaibatsu, which had become the butt of a massive joke, was utterly doomed. Public opinion crushed the last remnants of the Takasugi Zaibatsu's reputation. Their former leader, Takasugi Minami, was so enraged that he died in the hospital, a devastating blow. Meanwhile, Takasugi Mikako faced accusations of illegally transferring assets, along with suspicions of liquidating stocks for cash. Originally, those funds had been meant for her retirement, but now, they were frozen pending investigation. With the collapse of the Takasugi Zaibatsu, the company's stock prices plummeted, and many of their assets were seized. In short, the Takasugi Zaibatsu had lost everything. And as the sole heir of the Takasugi Zaibatsu, Takasugi Toshihiko now faced attempted murder charges alongside an insurmountable amount of debt. It was as if he had been pushed off a cliff with no way to climb back up. At this point, Toshihiko's best hope was receiving the maximum sentence for attempted murder. Otherwise, life outside prison would be far worse than a lifetime behind bars. Seated on the sofa, Ren shook his head slightly as he switched off the TV. Then, he opened his diary, preparing to complete the final entry for the day. As expected, the fall of the Takasugi Zaibatsu also brought down Takasugi Toshihiko's adoptive parents, but this was inevitable. His adoptive father died from anger. His adoptive mother's assets were frozen for investigation, leaving her future retirement in question, and as the only heir of the Takasugi Zaibatsu, with his adoptive father dead and his adoptive mother losing all financial support, he is now burdened with every debt owed by the Takasugi Zaibatsu. Even if they sold off every last asset, it wouldn't be enough to pay back what was owed. For him, prison is probably the safest place to be right now. If he receives a life sentence, at least he can live out the rest of his days behind bars, but if he only gets 10 years, then his remaining time in this world might just be 10 years. Still, his fate is a fitting consequence for his actions. With that, Ren stopped writing. Today's diary entry was complete. Closing the diary, he quietly focused on the sensation of the magic potion digesting within his body. His seer sequence had progressed significantly today, thanks to his guidance of Sayuri and the divinations regarding Toshihiko's past. In a way, he had unknowingly fulfilled the role of a seer, accelerating his potion digestion. Already, while examining his spiritual energy, Ren noticed something surprising. His Marauder and Apprentice potions had also progressed in digestion. There was now only 1/5 left to complete their full digestion. This pace was honestly a bit shocking. It had been less than 2 weeks since he drank the potions, yet all 3 pathways were nearly digested. And that was without even intentionally role-playing any of them. At this rate, 1 more week? No. I won't even need a week to finish the rest. If nothing unexpected happens, I'll be facing a severe potion shortage soon. A sigh escaped him. Originally, he wasn't worried about potion progressions since he assumed it would take time. But now, what had previously not been a problem was becoming a major issue. Well, I'll do a divination later to see if anything interesting happens. That could wait. For now, he had to complete today's lottery first. The giant roulette wheel spun and slowly came to a stop. Lord of the Mysteries, acquired, sequence 8 potion, clown. A blue potion bottle appeared before Ren. He was no longer surprised by such occurrences. It just so happened that he had finished digesting seer today, and now the clown potion had arrived. Right on time. Without hesitation, he pulled out a maple leaf coin and flipped it. There was no problem with drinking the potion. The coin landed safely. Confirmed. Uncorking the bottle, he tilted it back and down the potion in one gulp. The clown potion had a rather stimulating sensation. Akin to carbonated soda, tingling and numbing his tongue. It was also intensely sweet. So sweet, in fact, that it was even sweeter than cola. Almost sickeningly sweet. Feeling slightly uncomfortable, Ren examined the empty bottle in his hand with mild surprise. Weird. It's not exactly bad, but why do these potions always taste so strange? Suddenly, Ren paused. Something felt off. The potion he had just swallowed was already digesting. His mind filled with a single question mark. Wait. What's happening? Did I already play the role of a clown before? Why is it digesting immediately after drinking? Ren thought back carefully. He couldn't recall doing anything that fit the role of a clown. He had never made a confession to a girl, nor had he ever visited a circus. In the past, he had simply been an ordinary high school student. He didn't see how any of his behavior resembled that of a clown. But the more he thought about it, the stranger it seemed. Or, have some of my past actions already been judged as clown-like? Chapter 162, Limitations of Gifts. Strange. Yeah, This was really strange. Ren couldn't recall doing anything that resembled a clown, so why was the potion digesting so effortlessly? Although it felt odd, rapidly digesting a potion stage wasn't a bad thing. The only issue was that the gap in potion sequences remained just as large. As the clown potion was digested, Ren could clearly feel that Sefirah Castle was integrating with him at an accelerated pace. The degree of synchronization had increased significantly. And as a result, the permissions he could access within Sefirah Castle also expanded. Now, he could temporarily grant himself the abilities of a Sequence 6. But along with this, Ren received a critical information. Before reaching Sequence 4, you cannot borrow the power of Sequence 4 in advance. Sequence 4 marks the beginning of mythical creature transformations. Resting his chin on his hand, Ren quickly understood the implication. If low and mid-sequence beenders were still considered ordinary humans, then high-sequence beenders were something beyond human. Half mortal, half divine. Physically, mentally, and spiritually, they far surpassed normal humans. Once someone reached high sequence, they would begin to exhibit mythical creature characteristics. The fundamental divide between mid-sequence and high-sequence beenders. If I attempt to break the limit and borrow Sequence 4's power prematurely, my body will be transformed by the influence of the source material. Huh? Wait. Isn't that a good thing? Starting the transformation toward Sequence 4 before actually reaching it, that didn't seem bad at all, right? Yet, Sefirah Castle had warned him against doing so. Ren never ignored warnings from Sefirah Castle. If it really intended to harm him, it wouldn't bother issuing a warning at all. But it had. That meant this was a dangerous choice. Ren sighed and shook his head slightly. I guess this isn't as good as it sounds for me. Memorizing this warning, he immediately dismissed any thoughts of borrowing Sequence 4's power. There was no need to recklessly explore the unknown, especially when it wasn't beneficial. Shifting his focus, Ren relaxed his boiling spirituality and checked his current state. It seems there's no negative effect on me. And Wildcard's value is still rising. He couldn't help but sigh. If he hadn't obtained Wildcard early on and had jumped directly into sequence potions, he wasn't sure if he would have made it this far. Even though there were no other beenders in this world, if it had been only him, maintaining absolute rationality would have been nearly impossible. Ren was well aware of his own nature. He wasn't someone with extraordinarily strong willpower. If he had been a revolutionary from a past era, maybe he could have endured. But he was just an ordinary person, living in modern society, enjoying the comforts of the times. He lacked the unyielding determination of those who had fought through hardship. Growth required support. Without it, he couldn't walk this path alone. Knock, knock, knock. A sudden knocking at the door interrupted Ren's thoughts. Sighing, he got up and walked to the entrance. When he opened the door, he wasn't surprised to see a familiar black and white panda pajama outfit. Aren't you sleepy this late at night? Ren gazed at his neighbor with mild exasperation. I've been thinking about the studio lately, and it's been keeping me up. Okino Yoko had her reasons. Lately, she had been contemplating starting her own studio, a major step toward her dream of running a business. She was no longer just an idol under an agency. She wanted to become her own boss. Fine, come in first. Hee hee. Yoko grinned and stepped inside. Like it was second nature, she closed the door behind her, locked it, and then pulled out a pair of fluffy indoor slippers from the entrance cabinet. After slipping them on, she followed Ren into the living room. She plopped onto the sofa, exhaling deeply. Suddenly becoming my own boss. It really feels like a dream. Ren glanced at the visibly relaxed Yoko and shook his head helplessly. If your true fans saw you like this, they'd probably be terrified. Hearing this, Yoko just rolled her eyes. There's always a difference between being on stage and being at home. Fans say they want idols to be real, but even the most genuine idols have a distinction between their private life and public image. Even as an idol, you need to be casual at home. Otherwise, fans will feel like it's all fake. That said, I always try to show my fans the truest version of myself. Otherwise, if the contrast between my stage persona and my real self is too big, it could cause serious issues. You're not wrong. Ren agreed. Many celebrities who built their careers around a certain public persona had suffered major backlashes when their real personalities clashed with their image. A strong public persona could attract fans, but if it ever collapsed, those same fans could become haters overnight. So, it was always better to maintain a moderate image. Not too high, not too unrealistic. You're still thinking about the studio even this late at night? It's been a few days. Have you reached out to anyone in the industry yet? I have, but almost every time I bring it up, I get rejected. Ren wasn't surprised. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. It's actually not. Yoko chuckled. If I tell them about my plans in advance, They won't be able to negotiate with me later out of guilt. But it's not like I got nothing out of it. A few close friends, people I used to work with, have reached out to me. They said if I actually go through with starting a studio, they'd support me. Of course. If I can help them cover their contract termination fees first. Ren nodded slightly. Just make sure to set clear rules in advance. You don't want unnecessary trouble later. You need to confirm that their words aren't just empty promises. Don't worry, I've already told them that. Hearing this, Ren picked up on something. So, you're so excited that you can't sleep? Hee hee. Yoko smiled sheepishly. Well, you're still awake too, right? So I figured I'd come over and chat. Chapter 163, Sleepless Slow Walk. Ren sighed silently and poured a cup of hot water for Yoko. Thank you. After taking a sip, Yoko felt the warmth spread through her body. You can't sleep either? I guess not. His heightened state of excitement made it impossible for Ren to fall asleep anytime soon. I was planning to go out for a walk. Who would have thought you'd be awake this late too? A walk outside? Hearing Ren mention this, Yoko's interest was immediately piqued. In an instant, she sat up straight on the sofa. That's a great idea. Watching Yoko's sudden enthusiasm, Ren immediately regretted bringing it up. But since he was the one who suggested it, there was no backing out now. So, you really want to go out now? You'll have to change clothes first. Isn't that a hassle? Why would I need to change? This works just fine. To prove her point, Yoko stood up and spun around in front of him. Her thick, fluffy pajamas were definitely warm enough. That much was clear. Are you sure? If you go out in those, they'll probably be unwearable by the time we get back. It's fine. Yoko smiled confidently. Since I mentioned liking this style of pajamas, one of my sponsors sent me a whole variety of them. I have at least 7 or 8 different sets, so I'm not worried about them getting dirty. She had grown particularly fond of this style of pajamas. Not only were they cute, but they were incredibly warm. Even without a heater, wearing them in cold weather was enough to stay comfortable. Recently, she had also discovered another unexpected advantage. If she wore these pajamas, pulled up the hood, and added a mask, almost no one could recognize her as the famous Okino Yoko. There was no risk of attracting attention. Oh, right. I bought a matching set in your size, too. I was planning to give it to you as a gift. Wait here, I'll go grab it. As Yoko dashed off, Ren felt an inexplicable sense of foreboding. And sure enough, when she returned, she was holding a dark green dinosaur pajama set. Here. Put this on. Let's go for a walk together. Despite Ren's reluctance, he was pushed into the room and forced to change. To his surprise, the pajamas were actually very comfortable. Even without a heater on, they were incredibly warm, and the soft, fluffy fabric felt nice against his skin. Now, he understood why Yoko liked them so much. However, this particular set of pajamas had a major problem. Especially visually. Standing before the full-length mirror, Ren took in his reflection. A cute green dinosaur stared back at him. If he pulled up the hood, the little dinosaur face would bare its tiny fangs. Suppressing his embarrassment, Ren turned around. Only to see a short, stubby tail dangling from the back. Before he could react, Yoko playfully grabbed the tail and held on to it. Can you not? Sure. She didn't let go. But only if you agree to go out with me tonight. Ren was silent for a long time. He pointed at his reflection in the mirror. Wearing pajamas? Yes. You're a celebrity. Shouldn't you be more careful about how you dress in public? I won't be recognized if I dress like this. With that, Yoko cheerfully grabbed his dinosaur tail and led the way out. Alright. Let's go. Come on, let's go for a walk. Ren's opinion was completely ignored. Having no other choice, he put on his cotton outdoor slippers and followed Yoko outside. Luckily, there weren't many people in the area. Even if they were seen wandering around in pajamas, it wouldn't attract too much attention. As they walked side by side, Yoko stretched her arms out and let out a contented sigh. The cold air feels refreshing. You feel relaxed? Yoko nodded. Now that she was outside, the crisp night air helped clear her head. Her earlier excitement had cooled down, leaving her feeling calm and refreshed. I wouldn't have been able to make this decision without you. Yoko would never forget the reason she had the freedom to choose her own path. It was all thanks to Ren. If not for his financial support, she wouldn't have even dared to consider starting her own studio. If not for his connections, no one in the industry would have been willing to help her. She had never forgotten that. Even though he always claimed that he didn't like getting involved in other people's affairs, the reality was, he still chose to help. She turned her head and gazed at the young man walking quietly beside her. Then, without a word, she gently tugged on his sleeve. Ren looked over. There's something stuck on your hood. Eh? Caught off guard, Ren instinctively reached up to check. The moment he turned his head, he suddenly felt something warm against his cheek. From the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of her familiar, delicate face. Closer than ever. For a brief moment, his mind completely shut down. By the time Yoko stepped back, Ren was still frozen in place. He had never experienced something like this before. He had never been in this kind of situation. He had no idea how to respond. PFFT. Seeing Ren blush and struggle to react, Yoko couldn't help but burst into laughter. Wow, you really have no resistance to girls, huh? I thought you'd handle it better, but it turns out you actually see me as a sister. Then, without hesitation, she took his hand in hers. Oh, by the way, just so you know, that kiss on the cheek? It was my first time. After all, you know my public image. I'm still the pure idol. Okino Yoko. Seeing that Ren was still too flustered to speak, she simply smiled and gently pulled him along. Come on, just keep me company for a little longer. Chapter 164, Promise. Are you really that nervous? Yoko could feel the tension in Ren's hand. I'm just not used to it. That was all the confirmation Yoko needed. This guy really didn't see her as a woman. He had done so much for her, yet he still only regarded her as a friend or family member. What could she even say about this? Ren's thought process was definitely different from most people. You really just think of me as a sister, huh? A little bit. Do normal siblings kiss each other on the cheek? I think so. Then technically, we're still within the boundaries of sibling affection, right? I guess. So. And you're okay with that? Yeah. I suppose it's fine. But I'm not. Seeing how seriously he was trying to rationalize it, Yoko rolled her eyes. I'm obviously older than you. Why am I the little sister in the end? And besides, can you really just brush off what happened as a simple sibling gesture? True, their relationship wasn't quite the same as before. Noticing Ren's brief look of disappointment, Yoko smiled and gently squeezed his hand. So, did you think our relationship was always that pure? Her question caught Ren off guard. Wasn't it? He genuinely believed their relationship was just friendship. Seeing his confused expression, Yoko sighed. Not at all. Think back. Our first meeting was when I was nearly strangled to death. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even be here. Yeah. Ren nodded slightly. That night, he had just finished crafting the eye bracelet and was relaxing at home when he heard a commotion next door. On a whim, he had decided to intervene, kicking that intruder in the face and saving Yoko from a near-death crisis. The second time we met was the very next night. I came over to thank you. Then, I found out you lived alone, so I started visiting more often. I wanted to be the big sister, but somehow, you ended up treating me like a little sister instead. Honestly, Yoko felt wronged by this. She had fully intended to take on a protective role. But Ren, despite being younger, was far more capable and reliable. And his tendency to listen rather than speak made it easy for people to confide in him. Somehow, the roles had been reversed. Since then, I started coming over all the time. I cooked for you. Potato stew, pork rib soup, hoping to regain my big sister status. But instead, you were the one comforting me about work. Recently, you've even been helping me with my career. 2 to 300 million yen. Just like that, you didn't hesitate to support me. You even went out of your way to pull strings and stand as my backing in my contract termination. Siblings might help each other out, but let's be honest. Real siblings don't do all that. She had a point. Looking back, Ren felt like he had been investing too much effort into Yoko. Why had he gone so far for her? But I never had that kind of intention. I know. And judging by his reaction tonight, if he did have those thoughts, he would have shown some kind of response earlier. Your reaction makes it pretty clear. You really do see me as a little sister. That actually frustrated Yoko. She had always wanted to be the older sister in their dynamic. Yet, somehow, she had ended up on the other side of that equation. Still, there was one thing she was certain of. But we can't always be siblings. I don't want to be your sister forever. Yoko had long since came to terms with her own feelings. She never reacted this way with any other man. She and Ren could talk for hours, joke around, and just be themselves. She liked the way she felt when she was with him. But before the conversation could continue, she abruptly changed the subject. By the way, the person I contacted last time, the one who helped me get through to you. They have a special relationship with you, don't they? Otherwise, they wouldn't have agreed to help so easily. Ren hesitated. It's complicated. There are things I can't explain to you yet. It's a secret. Hearing this, Yoko relaxed slightly. Yeah. I had a feeling. I always thought you had some kind of secret, but I never asked. And now, I get the sense that this secret involves other people too. She wasn't wrong. There were things connecting Ren to other individuals, and those things couldn't be shared so easily. Yoko didn't pry any further. Instead, she asked something else. Then, can I know your secret someday? Ren was silent for a moment before shaking his head. I'm not sure. Only 3 people know about it right now. I don't know if more will learn about it later. Some things can only be understood after you experience them yourself. I see. Yoko wasn't disappointed at all. In fact, just from his response, she gained insight into the nature of his secret. So, it has something to do with a special power? Ren hesitated before nodding slightly. That confirmed it. Now, she understood why the person she contacted had been willing to help so easily. This was indeed a complicated connection. In that case, until I gain whatever it is you're talking about, let's just keep things the way they are. But you're not allowed to start avoiding me, alright? Ren nodded. Alright. Chapter 165, Hair-drying encounter turns into a supermarket robbery. After reaching an agreement, the slightly stiff atmosphere between them dissipated. Dressed in animal pajamas, the two walked hand in hand through the quiet night streets, looking like a pair of silly lovebirds out for a nighttime stroll. Although they drew some attention, most people chose to ignore them. As they reached a business district where the surrounding shops and supermarkets had already closed, they came to a stop. So many people were staring at us just now. Yoko shivered slightly, feeling uneasy. Ren was speechless at her reaction. This woman. She really doesn't think before acting. For someone like him, a textbook case of social anxiety. Not to be confused with a social recluse. This kind of situation was the last thing he wanted to experience. Just as he was about to sigh, a strong sense of intuition prompted him to look up. Ren turned his head to the right, spotting a supermarket that had already ceased operations for the day. The lights inside were completely off, making it difficult to see anything through the glass. However, white graffiti was visible on the 3 upper windows of the supermarket. A pale white curtain hung behind the graffiti, making it even harder to make out the markings clearly. Ren then turned to look at the office building on the left, which was still brightly lit. Due to the strong illumination from that side, the white light reflected off the supermarket's glass, making the graffiti even less noticeable. But he could still see it. Huh? Yoko turned toward Ren, puzzled. Noticing his gaze, she followed his line of sight and looked in the same direction. However, with the night's darkness acting as a curtain, the supermarket's interior appearing pitch black, and the glass reflecting light, she couldn't see the supposed Sos at all. Where do you see Sos? Yoko squinted, trying to find it but to no avail. The reflection makes it hard to see. It's normal that you can't spot it. As he spoke, Ren took out his phone from Sefirah Castle. Instead of dialing the emergency line, he called a certain police officer he was familiar with. After a few moments, the call connected. With his keen hearing, Ren immediately picked up on the background noise. It was far from quiet. He could hear several people talking. It seemed like she was working overtime. Good evening, Officer Sato. Oh, it's you. Recognizing the voice, Sato Mueko immediately knew who was calling. That strange, mature-sounding boy she had met on Tsukekage Island. Why are you calling me so late? Did something happen again? Mueko joked, half expecting him to say no. Yes, actually. Just as you said. She had only been joking, but the moment she realized he was serious, Mueko's demeanor changed. Are you in trouble again? No, nothing like that. I was just out for a walk with my neighbor to get some fresh air, and I noticed an Sos sign written on the glass of a closed supermarket. Also, the curtains on the 3 windows with the Sos markings have been drawn. Mueko's breath hitched. And Sos sign written on the supermarket's glass. Something so obvious should have been noticed sooner. If no one had seen it before, that would mean someone wrote it after the supermarket closed. And if the windows with Sos had curtains drawn over them, it was clear that someone was trying to conceal the message. Which meant, something was happening inside that supermarket. A bad feeling crept up her spine. Because she suddenly recalled. Recently, there had been a series of supermarket robberies targeting high-value items like gems and jewelry. Feeling the shift in her tone, Ren's curiosity was piqued. Has something similar happened before? Yeah, you could say that. Mueko hesitated for a moment but didn't deny it. Recently, a gang of robbers has been targeting supermarkets. They operate with careful planning, disguising themselves as cleaning or event staff before attacking the security guards after closing time. They then steal valuable gems and jewelry from the supermarket's counters. They disable the security system beforehand, ensuring that no alarms are triggered. In other words, they're a well-prepared and highly organized criminal group. After the recent incident on Tsukekage Island, this new wave of robberies has put pressure on Inspector Magure. His superiors want the case solved as soon as possible. Mueko sighed. But the problem is, I don't know if this SOS is a real distress signal or just some prank. If I had concrete proof, I could convince Inspector Magyar to mobilize a large police force for an arrest operation. But without solid confirmation, I'd only be able to bring a few colleagues along to check it out. Are you sure about what you saw? Ren smirked slightly, then turned on the speaker function and handed the phone to Yoko. Yoko immediately understood his intention and took the phone with her free hand. There was an easy way to confirm if this was the work of the robbers. For most people, they would need to enter the supermarket to verify the situation firsthand. But for a seer, no secret could remain hidden. Ren took out the maple leaf gold coin from his pocket, raised it slightly, and flipped it. The coin landed with the letter side facing up. A clear answer. I can confirm. It's the robbers. You're sure? Yes. The next moment, he heard the sound of hurried footsteps on the other end of the phone. It seemed like they had sprung into action immediately. The location is Kamenari Supermarket, on Akasaka Road. Got it. Amamiya Ren hesitated for a moment before posing another question in his mind. Do the robbers have guns? He flipped the gold coin again. Once more, the letter side faced up. Officer Sato, be careful. The robbers are armed. As expected. Mueko wasn't too surprised. In previous cases, security guards had reported feeling something cold and metallic pressed against their backs. However, since they had been blindfolded at the time, they couldn't confirm whether it was a real firearm or just a replica. You're still outside the supermarket? Yes. Take your neighbor and leave immediately. That place is dangerous. Understood. Good luck with your work. With that, Ren ended the call and tucked the gold coin back into Sefirah Castle. He took his phone and stopped paying attention to the supermarket. Instead, he simply led Yoko away. We'll leave this to the police. Yoko, still slightly dazed, didn't resist. She cast one last glance at the supermarket but said nothing. Instead, she quietly followed Ren as they left. Chapter 166, Opportunities for the Non-Professional Group. At that moment, Mueko rushed into Superintendent Matsumoto's office. Bang. Inspector Magyar. Superintendent Matsumoto. The supermarket robbers have made their move again. I just received information that Enso's distress signal has appeared on the glass of Kamenari Supermarket on Nagasaka Street. Additionally, I have confirmed that the robbers are armed. Both Magyar Juzo and Matsumoto Kionaga immediately stood up. They had been struggling to deal with this group of robbers for a while. These criminals were extremely cunning, planning their actions meticulously each time. Their reconnaissance was precise, allowing them to fully grasp the security conditions of their target supermarkets. Even disabling the security systems before striking. With so few leads, tracking them down had proven incredibly difficult. If they had more time, they might be able to gather additional clues, but time was something they didn't have. After the incident on Tsukekage Island, most of their manpower had been deployed to pursue those damn drug traffickers. Since that was a high-priority case, a large number of officers from various departments had been reassigned, leaving the rest of the force stretched thin. Otherwise, if they had more personnel available to investigate, they wouldn't have gone several days without finding a single lead. Now, with increasing pressure from the higher-ups, both Magyar Juzo and Matsumoto Kionaga had been racking their brains for a breakthrough. So when they suddenly heard what Mueko said, how could they not be pleased? Officer Sato, where did this information come from? Magyar Juzo asked instinctively, but he quickly noticed that Sato Mueko was avoiding his gaze. Cough. Matsumoto Kionaga cleared his throat, steering the conversation back on track. Officer Sato, can you guarantee the accuracy of this information? Yes, I can. Mueko hesitated briefly before revealing her source. I can confirm that the information is accurate. But I promised my informant that he would not be disturbed. That's understandable. Matsumoto Kionaga nodded in agreement. Providing intelligence to the police was no simple matter. If an informant's identity were to be exposed, it could cause them significant trouble. He himself had several informants who assisted in investigations and intelligence gathering, so he understood the concern well. Officer Sato, you don't need to disclose your informant's identity, but are you willing to take full responsibility for the credibility of the information? I am. Good. Matsumoto Kionaga gave a small nod. He didn't need to dig deeper into the source, but whoever provided the intelligence had to be reliable. You've given a definite answer, which means you trust this informant. That's enough confirmation for me. Then, Matsumoto Kionaga turned to Magyar Juzo, who still seemed uncertain. Magyar, you need to stop treating Officer Sato like a child. She needs room to grow and improve. Not everything should be decided for her. Besides, you should have more faith in her abilities. Matsumoto Kionaga gave Magyar Juzo a meaningful glance. Though Magyar Juzo wasn't entirely convinced, he nodded slightly. Officer Sato, You will personally take charge of this case. Your promotion file has just been submitted. If you handle this well, I believe your evaluation will be finalized soon. Eh? Mueko's eyes widened in surprise. She had known that she met the requirements for a promotion, but becoming an inspector required more than just qualifications. It required seniority. She had assumed that her turn hadn't come yet. But who would have thought that Superintendent Matsumoto would give her such an unexpected opportunity? What, do you not want it? Inspector Megure reminded her with a slight smirk. Realizing her hesitation, she quickly responded. Yes. Then get moving. The robbers are armed and have taken some security guards hostage. How you handle this is up to you. Yes. I'll arrange the operation immediately. Brimming with determination, Mueko left to make preparations. Meanwhile, Megure Juzo remained in the office, looking at Superintendent Matsumoto with a hint of confusion. Superintendent Matsumoto, isn't this against protocol? Matsumoto Kiyonaka loosened his tie and sat back in his chair. Megure, you're aware that her final rank will be police inspector, aren't you? Megure Juzo hadn't expected that statement, but he nodded slightly. You know how dangerous our job on the front lines is. But that doesn't mean. Megure, has Sato ever had an informant before? Megure Juzo froze for a moment, then shook his head. No. When did she acquire one? He thought back carefully, then it hit him. After she returned from Tsukekage Island. Exactly. Matsumoto Kiyonaka nodded slightly. She was only supposed to protect those young ladies on Tsukekage Island. So tell me, who do you think her informants are? The people around those young ladies. Seeing Megure Juzo's realization finally dawn, Matsumoto Kiyonaka nodded again. That girl isn't part of the professional track, her situation is different from Shiratori's. So she's going to stay on the front lines for a long time. And her final rank will likely only be police inspector. Megure Juzo's expression grew complicated. As someone who had held the police inspector rank for decades, he understood all too well what Matsumoto Kiyonaka was implying. Mueko didn't have any special connections or background. She was a traditional criminal investigator. A member of a non-professional track. That meant her career path was predetermined, she would gain experience, serve for a certain number of years, and maybe get promoted. Eventually. This system was undoubtedly unfair to a capable female officer like her, but the world itself was unfair. Yes, there were women in high-ranking positions within the police force, but the majority of them were merely police inspectors and most were nearing retirement age. Every one of them had earned their position through years of experience. Sato Mueko was no exception. Her future was set, she would continue gathering experience, and that was it. But now, she has an opportunity. By connecting with those young ladies, she has created a valuable network for herself. This is an undeniable advantage. With this, she will have a special background moving forward. And that background has ties to both politics and business. This is not a bad thing. Do you understand? Matsumoto Kiyonaga's voice carried a rare sense of patience. I know you've always looked after Sato out of concern for justice and you even see her as a daughter. But precisely because of that, I believe this is the best thing for her. At least now, she has a real opportunity, one that will allow her to move forward without being stuck in the endless cycle of gaining experience. Megure Juzo was silent for a moment. Then, after considering it carefully, he nodded. He had to admit. Matsumoto Kiyonaka was right. Chapter 167, Zero Frame Star Damn Brat. The plan had been going so smoothly today. But then, an unexpected variable appeared. The incompetent fools who were supposed to assist her couldn't even handle 4 kids. What an absolute disgrace to the adults involved. But what could she do now? The entire operation had fallen apart. If she stayed any longer, she wouldn't be able to escape once the police arrived. Since those useless idiots had been caught by 4 mere children, she might as well push all the blame onto them and make her escape. Hey, big sis, planning to run away all by yourself? At the corner of the alley, a cocky-looking kid walked out slowly. His arrogant expression made her, the leader of the robbery gang, feel incredibly annoyed. It seemed the police had already been alerted. But how? She had personally cut off and disabled the supermarket's security system, there was no way a distress signal could have been sent. Yet, the reality before her eyes told her that things had spiraled out of control. A dangerous glint flashed in her eyes. This little brat in front of her. He had potential. With that thought, she swiftly pulled out a gun from her bag and fired, without even aiming. The moment he saw the gun, Edagawa Conan's pupils shrank. He immediately dove behind the corner of the wall. Bang! A hole was blown straight through the concrete. Conan swallowed hard. He had encountered many criminals before, but rarely had he faced one who opened fire immediately. She wasn't hesitating. She wasn't even trying to intimidate. She had fired straight for the kill. And worse, She had aimed at his vitals. Even when facing a child, she didn't hesitate to pull the trigger. If his instincts hadn't kicked in and he hadn't moved the moment he sensed danger, that shot could have ended him. Damn it. At this moment, Conan wanted to slap himself. He should have planned an escape route before approaching the suspect. Why did he walk right up to her after confirming she was part of the robbery gang? But who the hell shoots a kid on sight? He had only intended to buy some time. In fact, after he sent the distress signal earlier, he had noticed two people passing by downstairs. More importantly, he had seen one of them make a very obvious phone call. Especially when that person dragged his companion away after the call, their actions made it clear that they had noticed something inside the supermarket and had contacted the police. With that confirmation, Conan had chosen to stall the remaining suspect. And now. Beep. Woo. Beep. Woo. Suddenly, the sharp wail of police sirens filled the air, surrounding the supermarket. Conan let out a sigh of relief. Looks like my guess was correct. Someone saw the distress signal. Someone called the police. But before he could celebrate, footsteps. Fast. Approaching him. Conan's heart clenched. Oh, no. She's coming for me. No more hesitation. He bolted. Stopping was not an option. Because if he stopped now, the consequences weren't something he could afford. Bang. Another gunshot. A fresh bullet hole appeared in the wall right next to him. At that moment, Conan felt as if he was playing a dangerous game with death itself, where a single mistake would cost him his life. And the leader of the robbers wasn't going to let him escape. She could already hear the police swarming the area, but that only made her more determined. If the police caught her, she was finished. If she was going down, she might as well take this brat with her. Conan clenched his teeth. Damn it, why did I rush in without fully assessing the situation? Even if I wanted to stall for time, I should have kept my distance from the leader of the gang. But before he could dwell on his mistake, the situation outside had already changed. Mueko had heard the gunfire. Her expression darkened instantly, and she snapped out orders. The assault team, follow me inside. The riot squad, stay behind us. Everyone else, maintain perimeter security. As she spoke, her gaze flicked toward the top of the supermarket. Are the snipers in position? Snipers are in place. Hearing the response through her radio, Mueko Sato's grip on her gun tightened. Snipers, keep an eye on the target. If you get the clear shot, take it. Understood. Let's move. Without hesitation, Sato Mueko led the charge. She had personally retrieved her bulletproof vest before leaving the station. And now, she was at the front lines. The officers behind her weren't slacking off either. The assault team in front and the riot squad behind were moving in formation, fully aware of the mission's importance. Because they all understood. If this operation succeeded, it would be a major credit to their careers. And they all knew who was leading this mission. Officer Sato Mueko. With everything lined up for success, they pushed forward at an unprecedented speed. Meanwhile, the female robber chasing Conan had also heard the heavy footsteps closing in. In less than a minute, the police were already right behind her. Mueko caught sight of her target. A woman. Armed. Sato didn't waste time shouting a warning. She raised her gun while running and fired. Bang. A shot to the abdomen. The robber stumbled, gasping in pain. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She wasn't going to escape. But she still had a gun. And she could still take someone down with her. She lifted her weapon, taking aim at the female officer who shot her. Scatter. Mueko immediately shouted and dove for cover. The assault team reacted instantly, dispersing in a well-trained maneuver. Bang. The shot missed. The robber's face twisted in rage, and she quickly ducked behind a wall. But she failed to realize. The supermarket's glass windows were right next to her. And her position was perfect? For a sniper. Sniper, take the shot. Mueko's voice was cold and decisive. Fire. Bang. A red mist bloomed in the air. The female leader collapsed to the ground, her hands still clutching her wounded abdomen. Her eyes were wide open in disbelief. Chapter 168, The Latecomers. It was over. Through his vision, Ren observed as the police wrapped up the scene. Aside from the female gang leader who had been taken down, the 4 other male robbers had been restrained in handcuffs. And along with the criminals, the police also escorted 4 children out of the supermarket. Kuto. He couldn't help but wonder. Who else would be this restless, running around in the middle of the night? Of course, it was him. Earlier, when he stood outside the supermarket, Ren had questioned who could possibly be messing around this late. And now, the answer was clear. What are you doing? Snapping out of his thoughts, Ren shook his head slightly. Just checking whether the police have handled the situation. Huh? Yoko blinked in confusion and turned to glance behind her. They were several blocks away from the supermarket now. How could he see anything? You're not even trying to act anymore, huh? You were so good at pretending before. Ren sighed helplessly. Some things are bound to be revealed. There's no point in hiding them forever. And besides, I never told you anything, you just figured things out yourself. There were things Ren would never disclose on his own. But if Yoko guessed them, then his response was simple. He'd just pretend not to know what she was talking about. Whatever. After staring at him for a while, Yoko put her curiosity aside. She didn't need all the answers right now. As long as she was able to figure out some of his secrets, that was enough for now. She wasn't going to be just another clueless woman in his life. Bit by bit, she'd uncover the truth. For now, she was satisfied. At the very least, she'd wait until she got what he had promised her, then she'd start asking more questions. I'll pretend I don't know anything for now. But when the time comes, you'll tell me little by little, right? Ren nodded slightly. Hearing his confirmation, Yoko let out a small sigh. I'm going to be really busy once I start my own studio. Not only do I have to be my own boss, but I also have to be my own artist. I even need to learn how to market myself, see how the agents do it. What about your previous one? My previous agent. At the mention of him, Yoko let out another sigh. Mr. Yamagishi is great at his job, but he's too good at making decisions for me. And he's loyal to the agency, not to me. The medication they sent me. It came through his hands. I don't think Mr. Yamagishi was unaware. But Ren immediately recalled Yamagishi Eiichi, the agent in question. In the original storyline, this agent did cause quite a bit of trouble for Okino Yoko. As an agent, he was undeniably skilled at protecting his artist and securing deals. But he was also someone who liked to make decisions on his own, rather than giving Yoko a say in her career. And that was a problem. Ren believed an agent should be someone who presents choices, not someone who makes them. Yamagishi Eiichi clearly failed in that regard. So, you're planning to be your own agent? Yeah. Yoko knew it wouldn't be easy. She had no experience in handling an agent's work, nor did she know what kind of challenges she'd face. Until I find someone I can trust, I'm not planning to hire another agent. At worst, I'll have my friend's agent help out. Besides, I doubt I'll be lacking in resources in the industry moving forward. That's true. Ren had to agree. As long as Shinomiya was backing Yoko, she would never have to struggle for resources. Countless artists would kill for the kind of opportunities she'd soon have at her fingertips. Agents were typically responsible for managing an artist's workload and daily affairs. But if Yoko didn't need to worry about securing jobs, then all she really needed was someone to help her filter out the offers that suited her best. After walking for a while, Yoko started feeling the effects of the cool night air. Well, I can't keep going. I'm getting sleepy. The breeze had finally settled her restless thoughts. And after watching such an eventful scene tonight, it felt like everything had reached a natural conclusion. Well, the more important reason was, if they kept walking forward, they'd reach the commercial district. And that, Ren wanted to avoid at all costs. There was no way he was willing to experience being stared at by strangers again. Especially not while still wearing dinosaur pajamas. Heading back? Yeah, I'm going home. Okino Yoko knew she'd be able to sleep well tonight. She had clarified something important. She had established her stance. Their relationship wouldn't change overnight, but for now, this was the best possible outcome for her. On their way home, they chose a quieter route. At least this way, they wouldn't have to deal with so many onlookers. Just like always, they didn't do anything unusual. They simply said their goodbyes and returned to their respective apartments. After closing the door behind her, Yoko leaned against it, placing her hands gently over her chest. Am I really going to end up dating a high schooler? Well, I'm only 22, and he's 16. The gap isn't that big. 6 years wasn't that big of a deal. And just like that, she brushed aside the thought. Besides, there are way bigger concerns than just our age gap. Her mind drifted back to the mysteries surrounding him. The abnormal things he could do. If she ever got close enough to uncover those truths, then age would probably be the least of her concerns. After all, once she truly stepped into his world, she would inevitably learn secrets that were far more important. Yoko didn't believe that the relationship Ren had mentioned before was as simple as it seemed. Perhaps, when she was finally faced with the full truth, their 6-year age gap wouldn't even matter anymore. Well, I should focus on my own goals first. I'll think about everything else later. Maybe I'm just another latecomer compared to her. Chapter 169, Not an Idiot Policeman After a long night of hard work, Miwako wasn't in the best mental state this morning. Even so, her mood was quite good. Yesterday, She had led her team in capturing the notorious supermarket robbery gang that had been causing a stir recently. Their leader had been shot dead on the spot, while the 4 core members were successfully apprehended. Since this gang had been creating quite a bit of trouble, their capture was a significant achievement. Not only did Mueko earn credit for the operation, but all the officers who participated in the arrest also shared in the merit. However, because Mueko had been the one to provide the crucial intel on the robbers' hideout, her promotion file had been moved up the chain. Yesterday's success was really thanks to his information. Mueko was truly grateful that she had trusted the intel Ren had provided. To be honest, even she hadn't been completely sure of its accuracy. But she had instinctively felt that he was trustworthy. And as it turned out, everything was exactly as Ren had described. I still can't figure out how he knew for sure. Mueko pursed her lips slightly, her curiosity about the young man growing. Of course, no matter what, she needed to properly thank him for his help. And from what Inspector Matsumoto had said, it seemed he supported her in doing so. Yet, Inspector Matsumoto's attitude had been somewhat unusual. Mueko had noticed the oddity in his reaction. Inspector Magure had remained silent at the time, but she knew that the whole situation was rather unorthodox. Still, Inspector Matsumoto hadn't seemed concerned about where she had gotten the information. Mueko paused, feeling a bit confused by it all. She looked down at the phone in her hand, and suddenly, an idea struck her. Checking the time, she saw that it was 6:35 a.m. Around the usual time people would be waking up. With that thought in mind, she called Ren. The call connected quickly. Good morning. Yesterday's case has been wrapped up, and I finally got some time to rest. While I'd love to say congratulations, Officer Sato, I'm not your superior. The implication was clear, there was no need to call him so early just to report in. I know. I actually wanted to ask for your opinion on something. I can't quite figure it out. Something you don't understand? Hearing this so early in the morning, Ren was momentarily thrown off. What is it? It's about the information you gave me yesterday. In general, informants need to be reported. Especially to higher-ups. But for some reason, Superintendent Matsumoto chose to overlook that. After confirming that I could take responsibility for the intel, he just let it go. I don't understand why. There was silence on the other end of the line. Hold on. Ren took out a maple leaf coin and flipped it, watching how it landed. Officer Sato, this is just my personal guess. Before Tsukekage Island, did you have any informants? No. In that case, your informant only appeared after Tsukekage Island? Yes. Then, Officer Sato, do you think Superintendent Matsumoto might have already guessed where your intel came from, through the connections of the young ladies you protect? Ah. It suddenly clicked for Mueko. So, Superintendent Matsumoto deliberately chose to let it slide? No, I think Superintendent Matsumoto overlooked it for a different reason. He wants to give you more room to advance. Ren flipped the coin in his hand again. It landed the same way as before, confirming his suspicion. Officer Sato, you're not from the professional track, right? As a non-career track officer, she did indeed lack certain advantages, especially when it came to promotion channels. Superintendent Matsumoto likely understands that too, which is why he's left you with a unique path to rise through the ranks. But I think they're mistaken. I don't have any special connections that could help you get promoted. Mueko chuckled, unconcerned. That doesn't matter. Compared to sitting in an office drinking tea, I'd rather be out on the field. I think Superintendent Matsumoto and Inspector Magure hope to push me toward the rank of inspector. Now, Mueko understood their intentions. She couldn't help but feel a little exasperated at their excessive concern. Though she appreciated their support, their real goal was to see her promoted to inspector. She had a good idea of how both Inspector Magure and Superintendent Matsumoto thought. Especially considering what had happened at Superintendent Matsumoto's daughter's wedding not long ago. She figured that Superintendent Matsumoto must be feeling a lot of pressure, which explained his reaction. Most inspectors don't personally rush into dangerous situations. Well, at least not on the front lines of combat. While inspectors still handled cases directly, they were more like commanders at the scene rather than officers engaging in direct confrontations. Although they might have misunderstood my intentions, I can't really say this arrangement is bad for me. And since this was a one-time thing, I don't have to explain myself too much in the future. Officer Sato, you're really a very traditional police officer. You're not rigid, nor do you stubbornly cling to rules. But at the same time, you genuinely enjoy police work. Ren thought that Mueko was the kind of officer who simply wanted to do her job well. She didn't particularly care about rank or promotion. She just loved being a cop. Officer Sato, you just don't want to deal with the dirty politics that come with higher positions, do you? The maple leaf coin flipped once more and landed the same way again. Seems like I guessed right. It wasn't surprising. Mueko wasn't naive. She was well aware that the upper ranks of the Metropolitan Police Department had their own set of unspoken rules. Only officers at the inspector level and above were privy to those inner workings. That was precisely why she had little desire for promotion. She preferred to focus on her work rather than navigating bureaucratic power plays. Inspector Magure and Superintendent Matsumoto probably know your thoughts on this as well. That's why they don't want you constantly throwing yourself into danger. By pushing you toward an inspector position, they're hoping to rein in your reckless tendencies. Chapter 170, a remote island that meets all the requirements. Friday afternoon, after school. With the weekend ahead, the Occult Research Club, which had already decided on their upcoming activities, gathered to finalize their plans. This will be our second outdoor club activity meeting. As always, Kaguya took the lead in organizing and hosting the discussion. Hayasaka had already prepared the map, displaying it on the club's massive TV screen. The enlarged Tokyo map appeared first, then gradually shifted towards the nearby sea, where a small island was outlined in red. This is Tsukekaji Island, the location of our last outdoor activity. Since we encountered drug dealers there last time, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department has tightened security in the surrounding area. But there are still many private territories among the nearby islands. The map then highlighted another island, this time in blue, similar in size to Tsukekaji Island. However, this island was located on the opposite side of Tsukekaji Island. From the map, it was clear that the two islands were completely separate locations. So, I've chosen another island that's almost uninhabited. Kaguya pointed to the blue-marked island. This island's situation is quite similar to Tsukekaji Island. Both belong to an archipelago located far from central Tokyo, but this one is even more remote. It's an archipelago bordering the Tokyo Circle, making it unsuitable for development. Hardly anyone takes an interest in such places. Because of its low development potential, the island's price was also quite cheap. So, I asked Antone out to purchase it. Buy an island? Hearing this, Ran couldn't help but feel as if her entire worldview was being shaken. Meanwhile, Kaguya remained completely unfazed. Actually, I think buying it was the best decision. We'll be visiting this weekend for the first time, and after that, we can mark the island as a location using Hayasaka's power. We need a secluded place to master our abilities, and this island will serve as a long-term training ground for us. It would be too easy to attract attention if we trained in the city. Besides, the island wasn't expensive. Shinomiya, can I ask how much it cost? Ren was a bit curious. Well, about $600,000. $600,000 US. That was definitely on the low side. Too low, even. That does seem suspiciously cheap. There must be a reason why this archipelago's land value is so low. Kaguya nodded slightly. There are quite a few reasons. For one, there are several dangerous underwater whirlpools near the island. There are no shallow areas around it, it's entirely surrounded by deep sea waters. If someone were to fall in, it would be extremely dangerous. Additionally, the island has an active volcano that erupts once or twice a year. Even though the land is quite fertile due to volcanic ash, the frequent eruptions make it nearly impossible to construct stable buildings there. I see. No wonder the price is so low. Now, Ren fully understood why the island was so cheap. Located on the outskirts of the Tokyo metropolitan area, surrounded by deep sea, and subject to yearly volcanic eruptions, these factors made it highly undesirable. Volcanic ash posed serious health risks, and it was also harmful to electrical devices. With so many issues stacked against it, it made sense that a sizable island would be sold for just $600,000. Even drug dealers probably wouldn't want to set up shop in a place like that. But for us, it's perfect. A remote and isolated location where we can make as much noise as we want without attracting attention. As for accommodations, that's not a concern. Amamiya Ren turned his gaze toward Hayasaka. As long as Hayasaka has the power of the Dorador fruit, we can train on the island while still returning home for meals and rest at night. Kaguya nodded in agreement. Just as Amamiya said. For us, this island is a place where no matter how much we stir up trouble, we won't be easily discovered. Even if there's an issue with the dimension Hayasaka creates using her ability, our training will remain hidden. The environment is truly ideal. Food and lodging weren't a problem. The island's many supposed disadvantages didn't actually affect them. In fact, after their initial visit, they wouldn't even need to take a boat to get there in the future. Additionally, I've confirmed that the volcano isn't expected to erupt this year. It'll be at least 3 months before the next period of activity begins. There won't be any issues for this weekend's trip. Kaguya had done her research thoroughly, ensuring there wouldn't be any problems. Now, onto the topic of meals after training. That's my turn. Chika immediately shot up from her seat. She had been eagerly waiting for this moment throughout the meeting. Kaguya sighed helplessly. Originally, our resting place was supposed to be either my home or the Sanzan Inn estate. But due to someone's enthusiastic insistence and considering that she can help cover for us if necessary, we decided on her house instead. Hee hee. Chika grinned widely, her face filled with excitement. My grandpa and grandpa said they'd help us cover things up if anything happened, so I suggested it to Kaguya. Hearing that, Ren found the arrangement quite reasonable. Well, that works out nicely. Although we could handle any issues ourselves, having additional support would definitely ease some burdens. If the Fujiwara elders are willing to back us up, it's better to involve them sooner rather than later. Preparing for the possibility of exposure early on means we can develop contingency plans for what comes after. When the time comes, we'll inevitably need some of the Fujiwara family's connections. You're already making preparations for that? Kaguya was slightly surprised. There's nothing wrong with planning ahead, but my concern is that things might escalate too suddenly, leaving us unprepared. After thinking it over, Kaguya realized he had a point. Making contingency plans in advance would prevent them from being caught off guard. That being said, we still don't have enough power yet. There are some things we can afford to expose, but certain channels must remain strictly confidential. No matter which organization we're dealing with. Chapter 171, Going out to sea at night. Around 6 in the evening, a large truck carrying the group arrived at the port. It was a scene reminiscent of their last outdoor club activity. The only difference was that last time, they had traveled on a yacht. This time, they would be using a cruise ship. Previously, they had reached Tsukekage Island by nightfall. Moreover, Tsukekage Island wasn't some undeveloped land, it had already undergone preliminary development and was home to tens of thousands of people. This time, however, their destination was a remote, isolated island, one that experienced 2 volcanic eruptions a year. They weren't heading there for a camping trip. After all, there were no human inhabitants on this island. Since they would need to spend the night on the water, a yacht wasn't a suitable option. Instead, they required a cruise ship with better accommodations. Naturally, the choice of captain was also important. Actually, after their last trip, Hayasaka had already explained some things about herself and Kaguya to the right people. Certain channels were deliberately kept open to provide a clearer understanding of their situation. As a result, this time, Nao Hayasaka had been able to handpick the captain, crew, and security personnel, people who aligned with the interests of the Hayasaka family. Unlike the Shinomiya family, which had too many internal leaks, the Hayasaka family was far more reliable. Additionally, due to the combined influence of Ai and Nao Hayasaka, Kaguya Shinomiya had delegated considerable authority to them. This led to an unexpected outcome: the entire Hayasaka family became fiercely loyal to her. To put it bluntly, after being treated as mere servants for their entire lives, someone had finally begun treating them as actual people. Because of this, the entire Hayasaka family now saw Kaguya Shinomiya as someone worth supporting. Especially those selected for this voyage, they had been informed of certain matters in advance. Upon learning that both the Hayasaka family's future and Miss Kaguya's circumstances were special, they quickly understood that their assignment for this trip was a direct result of trust. The realization left them energized, as if they had been injected with adrenaline. At the same time, they were all sworn to secrecy. Everyone understood that maintaining confidentiality was the top priority. No matter what strange things they saw on this journey, they had to remain unfazed. Everything had to be treated as perfectly normal. This night, the cruise ship welcomed its first set of guests. Yes, this vessel was brand new, and tonight marked its maiden voyage. So, we're really setting off at night? Aizawa Sakuya looked at the darkening sky, somewhat distressed. She had initially assumed they would leave tomorrow morning. Who would have thought they'd be departing tonight? Obviously. The island we're heading to is way more remote than last time. Not only is it isolated, but the environment is also harsh. Under these conditions, we can't just take a yacht over in the morning, can we? How would we even get any proper training done after exhausting ourselves with the trip? Nagi rolled her eyes. They had specifically chosen a nighttime departure to avoid the fatigue of an early morning journey. After all, traveling by yacht was exhausting, especially at full speed. If they spent their entire morning speeding across the ocean, only to arrive at an uninhabited island in the middle of nowhere, wouldn't that be way too much pressure? That's why we opted for a cruise ship. So we can rest on board at night and start training fresh in the morning. Training. It's honestly surreal hearing the word training come out of your mouth, Nagi. That's an exaggeration. Rolling her eyes again, Nagi strode forward, looking unimpressed. No, it's not. Sakuya found this situation truly absurd. She knew Nagi's personality better than anyone. This was someone who hated going outside, someone who preferred staying indoors no matter what. Getting Nagi to leave her house was always a challenge. Back when she attended Hiku Academy, if she claimed she wasn't going out, then she wasn't going out. But ever since she transferred to a public school, not only had she stopped skipping, but she had also been attending regularly, every single day, without arriving late or leaving early. This didn't make sense to Sakaya. And now, to top it off, Nagi was talking about training. Sakaya knew all too well how terrible Nagi's stamina was. A little bit of physical activity would leave her gasping for breath. Her endurance was practically non-existent. That's why Aunt Yukiriko was so important to her. So important, in fact, that she had the power to make Nagi willingly change herself. Sakaya wasn't stupid, she understood that Nagi never did anything without a reason. Especially something as drastic as changing her own lifestyle. Ordinary reasons would never be enough to make Nagi undergo such a major shift. So, the cause behind this change was obvious. Sanzan in Yukiriko. Nagi's biological mother. She didn't know exactly what Shiko had done, but she knew she had to keep an eye on her. Sakaya sighed and followed along. There were more people in this group who had obtained special abilities. Aside from Nagi and Maria, there were 3 others. Sakaya's gaze drifted toward them. Shinomiya Kaguya, Hyasaka, and Mori ran. Yet, neither Nagi nor Maria had ever revealed anything about their abilities to her. Of course, Sakaya had her own suspicions. But the person she was most concerned about wasn't any of them. There was one individual who stood out above the rest. Amamiya Ren. That man was the true catalyst behind everything. The one who undeniably possessed special abilities. Yet, trying to assess his power was nearly impossible. Most frustratingly, neither Nagi, Maria, nor Kiru had explained anything about him. They had deliberately kept it a secret. This left Sakaya at a disadvantage. She wanted to uncover the hidden truths, yet she was being kept in the dark. Aside from that, the identities of the other participants were obvious. The second daughter of the Suzuki Zaibatsu and the second daughter of the Fujiwara family. According to her research, all of them had gathered at Titan High School. The Suzuki heiress had already been a student there, but the Fujiwara heiress had transferred alongside Shinomiya Kaguya. They had been privy to everything from the start. On the other hand, Aizawa Sakaya had joined much later, meaning she knew the least. And that was a problem. Because sometimes, intelligence ceased to be intelligence. It became a secret. That was why she had chosen to join this trip. She needed more information. Otherwise, as someone who had entered midway through, she would never truly grasp the full picture. Chapter 172, Morning Exercise. The night was long, but for those who went to bed right after boarding the ship, it wasn't a problem. Throughout the night, the cruise ship remained incredibly steady, making it easy to forget they were even at sea. The calm waters ensured a comfortable journey, allowing the crew to work without any additional concerns. The passengers, too, enjoyed a peaceful rest, with nothing to disturb their sleep until dawn. By the time morning arrived, the sky had already begun to brighten. Perhaps due to being out at sea, the entire ocean was covered in thick fog. Fortunately, the cruise ship had reached the designated coordinates at precisely 3:24 a.m. and had already dropped anchor. However, instead of docking directly at the island, the ship remained 1,500 meters offshore. It wasn't a matter of choice, the waters around the island lacked any shallow areas suitable for docking. Instead, they plunged straight into the deep sea. Looking down from the deck, there was no sign of clear blue water, only a vast, pitch-black abyss stretching endlessly below, evoking an eerie sense of despair. With such depths, docking was impossible. However, a certain distance away from the trench surrounding the island, there were some shallower waters where a cruise ship could safely anchor. Everyone's rooms had large windows with a view of the sea. Early in the morning, Amamiya Ren was already awake. He walked over to the window, pulled back the curtains, and gazed at the world outside. Completely shrouded in dense fog. The morning mist at sea was truly thick. The heavy moisture in the air explained the dense fog. It was even thicker than fog in major cities, though with one key difference. Urban fog was often filled with dust and pollutants, making it difficult to breathe. But out here, the sea fog was pure, composed only of water vapor. Opening the window, Ren stepped out onto the balcony. As expected, the air was damp but refreshingly clean. The lack of dust compared to city air was noticeable. He narrowed his eyes, allowing his spiritual vision to activate. Through his enhanced sight, he easily pierced through the dense fog, revealing the island hidden behind it. The land was untouched by human development. There were clear signs of life on the island. Plenty of birds, snakes, and insects. But no large animals. That, however, was expected. In the distance, a still active volcano stood tall. It was one of the reasons why large animals were absent from the island. With eruptions occurring once or twice a year, survival for larger creatures was incredibly difficult. Given the scale of the volcano, Each eruption likely affected the entire island. Could large animals even endure such an environment? The odds were slim. Observing the island's surroundings, Ren finally understood why the deep trench existed next to it. Structurally, the island appeared to be the result of tectonic plate collisions, forcing land upward to form a volcanic island. In other words, what they saw above the surface was just the peak of an active volcano. Realizing this, Ren was momentarily speechless. It was rather astonishing that an island formed through volcanic activity would only experience 2 eruptions per year. Rather than being excessive, the frequency seemed surprisingly low. If this island was truly just the exposed peak of a massive volcano, then 2 eruptions a year seemed unusually restrained. Out of curiosity, Ren took out a maple leaf gold coin and flipped it. The coin landed heads up. Seriously? He covered his face, feeling exasperated. In a way, their knack for picking locations was impressive. They had managed to choose an unexpectedly unique place yet again. No wonder this island couldn't be sold. It was practically a ticking time bomb. Anyone with knowledge of geology would steer clear of it. Only scientists studying volcanic activity might find value in such a location. Was anyone else interested in this island? Of course. Despite its dangers, it had its uses. After all, for them, this island served as a unique operational base. Shaking his head, Ren turned back into his room and closed the glass door. He left his cabin and headed toward the main hall of the cruise ship. The other girls who had joined the trip were already there. Good morning, Amamiya-san. Good morning, Shinamiya-san. Ren glanced around, noting the excitement on their faces. Looks like everyone had a good night's rest. Seeing their enthusiasm, he made a sudden suggestion. If everyone's in good shape, how about a morning battle before breakfast? No one had expected such an abrupt proposal. This will be a demonstration match and also serve as morning exercise. It won't require high intensity, but it'll give everyone a better grasp of each other's abilities. It'll be especially beneficial for Sanoko, Fujiwara, and Aizawa, who don't have any supernatural powers. Oh, and Fujiwara. Bring a video recorder. You can film the battle however you like. What do you think? Although the idea was sudden, the group quickly became interested. Let's do it. Chika's eyes sparkled with excitement. That's right. This is a fantastic suggestion. Tsukiya's gaze also lit up. She was eager to witness a battle between supernatural powers firsthand. Oh. Sanoko's eyes widened in amazement. This would be her first time witnessing such a fight, and she was thrilled. For those without powers, this was a rare and exciting opportunity. For those who did have powers, it was an even greater motivation. Kaguya and Nagi exchanged glances, sensing a competitive spark between them. Neither had seen the full extent of the other's strength before, and both were curious. It's a great idea, Kaguya agreed. She wanted to test her own abilities against Nagi's. What do you think? I'm in. Nagi didn't hesitate. For an otaku, she was surprisingly competitive. But isn't there a gap in our power levels? Despite her enthusiasm, she was realistic. She knew she wasn't a match for Kaguya. That's true. Ren didn't deny it. Devil fruit users have a higher starting point in combat. Visions have great potential, but their initial power is naturally different from devil fruits. Plus, Shinamiya-san possesses one of the most powerful Logia devil fruits, giving her innate elemental abilities. Even without much combat experience, she already has a major advantage. So, we'll need to establish some additional rules. Chapter 173, you can only get it if you want it. Shinamiya has the advantage, so Sanzan-in can have Maria and Sajanami assist her. Huh? A 3-on-1? Chika exclaimed in surprise. She hadn't expected Ren to propose such an extreme setup. Even so, Shinamiya still holds the advantage. While a 3-on-1 might sound overwhelming, the gap in strength between the two sides remained clear. Even with this arrangement, Ren still felt that Kaguya had too much of an edge. Sanzan-in and Maria have only recently obtained their visions. While their elemental abilities have great potential, what they need most right now is to refine their control and mastery over those powers. Without extensive training, Sanzan-in and Maria won't be able to contribute much in a fight. I object. Tsukiya raised her hand in protest. Isn't Shinamiya in the same situation? This is the difference in starting points based on the nature of their powers. Ren explained patiently. Unlike visions, devil fruits grant immediate strength without requiring training. From the moment she ate the ice fruit, Shinamiya-san had access to powerful elemental abilities. Especially since she possesses a Logia-type devil fruit, widely considered the strongest class, specifically one that grants ice-based powers. The moment she ate it, Shinamiya-san gained the ability to become ice itself, rendering her immune to all physical attacks. In contrast, the attacks that Sanzan-in and Maria can currently generate are entirely physical. In other words, Their attacks would be practically useless against her. The real key player in this 3-on-1 match is actually Sefirah. Sefirah turned to look at Izumi, who stood calmly in her purple kimono, and blinked in confusion. She couldn't quite see how Izumi would be the main force in this battle. Sefirah possesses spiritual exorcism abilities, and that power isn't physical. That's why she's the central fighter in this match. As for Sanzan and Maria, their main role here is to familiarize themselves with the elemental powers they've acquired. So, what do you think, Shinamiya-san? After finishing his explanation, Ren left the decision to Kaguya. Kaguya took a moment to consider. She trusted Amamiya's judgment. A 3-on-1 might sound daunting, but she was confident she could handle it. I think it's fine. In that case, Fujiwara-san, get the video recorder. Let's head outside. Oh. Chika's excitement flared up as she immediately dashed to her room to retrieve the video camera she had prepared earlier. Once she was ready, Ren led the way onto the ship's deck. By now, the thick fog that had blanketed the area earlier had mostly dissipated. As the sun rose higher, the mist had completely lifted. From the deck, they had a clear view of the island before them. Surrounded by the deep blue-black ocean, the island stood prominently in the distance. Even from afar, it was evident that no signs of human habitation existed, no modern buildings, no infrastructure. A completely untouched island. A vast trench encircled the island, plunging deep into the abyss. This eerie natural barrier spanned approximately 700 to 800 meters across, adding a sense of isolation to the island. Looking down at the sea below, the depths were unfathomable. It was as if one were gazing into an endless void. This place. There's an entire trench surrounding the island? Chika's eyes widened. Zooming in with her camera, she confirmed the sheer scale of the trench. The more she looked, the more uncomfortable she felt. She stepped closer to the railing, adjusting the camera to film the abyss below. However, as she peered into the darkness, her breathing became uneven. Thalassophobia? Ren's voice came from behind her, grounding her for a moment. Chika took a slow, deep breath. Well, I did have a slight reaction. She looked at the abyss before her, troubled. I've never been good with dark places. The trench is pitch black. No light reaches down there. Every time I look into it, I can't shake the feeling that something unnatural could emerge from the depths. A classic case of deep-sea phobia. But at its core, this fear wasn't irrational. Humans had always feared the dark, feared nature itself. Compared to the vast, uncontrollable world around them, humans were minuscule. When nature shifted even slightly, countless people perished simply because they couldn't adapt. The best way to overcome such fear was to face it head-on. Or replace it with a stronger emotion. Excitement. Ren didn't say anything further. Instead, he turned to look at Kaguya. Shinamiya-san, let's go. Kaguya glanced at Chika, who still looked uneasy, and sighed. Then, without hesitation, she stepped toward the guardrail. With a light push, she vaulted over it. Chika's scalp tingled. A loud thud echoed. Panicked, she rushed to the railing and looked down. What she saw made her breathe a sigh of relief. Pa. Below, Kaguya stood calmly atop a floating platform of ice. She's changed so much. For the first time, Chika truly realized how different Kaguya had become. Ever since she ate the ice fruit, she's taken a completely different path. The deep sea that you fear is something she can now conquer. On the water, Kaguya adjusted her stance. With every step she took, an ice platform formed beneath her feet, allowing her to walk effortlessly across the sea. This was the power of her devil fruit. So, Fujiwara-san. What about you? Fujiwara Chika bit her lip, watching Kaguya walk across the water. A quiet sense of envy stirred within her. I don't have that kind of power. That was exactly what Ren had been waiting to hear. Desire. The qualification to obtain power began with wanting it. Without it, there was no path forward. Ren silently stepped behind Chika. Tell me, Fujiwara-san. Chapter 174, guiding Fujiwara Chika was suddenly lifted into the air by an invisible force. At first, she didn't react. But when a sudden burst of warmth and humidity reached her senses, she realized something was wrong. The sensation of being held vanished, and she found herself in an unimaginable place. Looking down, the abyss of her nightmares stretched beneath her. She was standing on the ocean. Her body tensed, trembling uncontrollably. The shaking was accompanied by an inexplicable warmth spreading down her legs. Chika froze, her entire body stiff. Especially when she realized that she had been released and was no longer held in place, her muscles locked up even further. But more than fear, a crushing sense of shame threatened to overwhelm her. She knew it. If Ren and Kaguya ever found out that she had wet herself out of fear, she would never be able to show her face again. No matter what, she could not let them find out. Luckily, she was wearing a skirt today instead of warm leggings. It shouldn't be too obvious. Right? Fujiwara-san, Ren's voice called out from 100 meters ahead, standing casually on the water. Now, do you have the courage to move forward? The terror surged again, paralyzing her limbs. Chika's body trembled violently. But this time, Ren didn't use the vast, crushing depths of the trench to instill fear in her. Instead, he delivered something even more terrifying. You didn't just pee yourself, did you? In an instant, all her fear was buried beneath sheer, soul-crushing shame. Her head shot up, eyes wide with disbelief. Across the water, Ren stood calmly, watching her. At this moment, she no longer cared about the dark abyss beneath her feet. Her private embarrassment had been exposed. Her dignity was on the line. Step. She took her first step forward. Then the second. Then she sprinted. Her body wobbled as she ran, fueled entirely by panic. Right now, Chika couldn't afford to dwell on her fear of the deep ocean. She had far more pressing matters to worry about. Like making sure Ren didn't tell anyone. It took her just 10 seconds to cross 100 meters, while wearing a skirt and small leather shoes. Panting heavily, Fujiwara Chika felt like her lungs were on fire. But even then, her tear-filled eyes glared at Ren as she grabbed the front of his shirt in a desperate grip. Don't say it. The overwhelming shame was too much to bear. But Ren only chuckled. You're too controlled by fear. Now, check for yourself. Did you actually wet yourself? Chika's mind blanked for a second. Then, she focused her senses, shifting her attention downward. And she felt nothing. No warmth. No dampness. Nothing at all. What? Her brain short-circuited. What's going on? Your senses deceived you. And that deception was caused by my ability. When your ability to think independently weakens, your emotions become much easier to manipulate. By distorting your senses just slightly, I made you think you felt something embarrassing. And that overwhelming shame was enough to suppress your fear. Chika trembled, then raised a small, trembling fist and lightly hit Ren's chest. Why, you scared me to death. For a second there, she had truly thought her life was over. If it had been real, she probably would have jumped into the ocean out of sheer embarrassment. But it wasn't real. She had been tricked. Ren, meanwhile, simply pointed downward. Now, do you still feel as scared as before? Chika hesitated. Then looked down. The sea below was still an endless, inky abyss. The darkness stretched far beneath her feet, completely unfathomable. Yet, though the fear still existed, it no longer controlled her. It no longer threatened to paralyze her completely. Much better. She took a slow breath, calming her racing heart. She had grown. Even if it was through some questionable means. Fujiwara-san, Ren spoke again, his voice even. You're afraid of the unknown, things lurking in the darkness that you can't understand or control. That trench beneath you is a place where light never reaches. The more imaginative a person is, the harder it is to suppress that fear. But what if you had enough power? For example, Shinamiya-san's power. Chika followed his gaze. Kaguya stood calmly on the sea, completely unshaken. The water beneath her feet had frozen over, spreading outward in all directions. If she weren't deliberately controlling the spread of ice, the entire cruise ship would have been frozen solid by now. Chika felt the cold even from a distance. Hiss. A shiver ran down her spine. Looking at the vast, frozen surface beneath Kaguya's feet, she finally understood something. Strength was everything. If I had power like that, then I wouldn't be afraid anymore. She was sure of it. If she possessed strength like Kaguya's, she wouldn't feel so helpless. So, Ren said with a small smile. This is why so many people have Junabiu tendencies. The desire for power is simply an acknowledgement of one's own weakness. And an understanding of one's limitations. Power itself is a form of courage. It's the same as how money is often a man's source of confidence. Because with money, men feel bolder, more capable of taking action. Power works the same way. It gives people the courage to face the impossible. Chika's breath evened out. Slowly. She realized how much her mindset had changed. So, Fujiwara-san, I hope you remember this feeling. Power is the key to unlocking your own heart. But don't just envy others. Desire it. Shinamiya-san's abilities aren't suited for you. But with that desire, you'll eventually obtain the power that you need. Chika clenched her fists, exhaling softly. For the first time, she had a clear goal. Chapter 175, One-Sided Morning Exercise. Chika, now much calmer, decided to put everything behind her. Amamiya, next time you want to explain something to me, just say it directly. She was confident in her ability to understand things. There was no need for such Extreme hands-on teaching. Alright, next time, I'll explain it with words, Ren replied. Talking was easy, after all. Chika nodded, then suddenly froze. Wait. Then why did you use practical teaching just now? Some things can't be explained properly with words alone. It's more effective to experience them firsthand. I see. Chika finally understood. From what she had learned about Amamiya, he wasn't someone who socialized much. In a school where people only addressed each other as classmates out of habit, it was understandable that he wasn't great with words. Ugh. Does that mean there'll be more practical lessons like this in the future? Just imagining it made her head ache. She let out a sigh, then looked down at her feet. Her small leather shoes gently tapped the surface of the water. For the first time, she noticed that there was something solid beneath her. What is this? Just a simple magic trick. Huh? Magic? On the ocean? Chika had heard of water-walking magic tricks before, but those were usually performed in pools. Who in their right mind would perform such a trick on the open sea? Let's go, Fujiwara-san. Shinamiya-san is ready. At Ren's words, Chika finally turned her attention to Kaguya. The frozen area beneath Kaguya's feet had expanded significantly. The sea itself had turned into her battlefield. Kaguya. Why are you so fired up? Chika didn't quite understand why Kaguya seemed so excited right now. Ren placed a hand on Chika's shoulder. A small flicker of fire appeared. And in the next instant, they were back at the cruise ship's railing. Shinamiya-san, it's time to begin. Standing on the frozen sea, Kaguya took a deep breath and gave a small nod. If she didn't know that Ren wasn't trying to make her mad, she might have thought he was doing it on purpose. Inhale. Exhale. Her unstable emotions unconsciously intensified the chill in the air. Sizzle. The frozen surface beneath her expanded even further. There was no mistaking it, Kaguya's resentment had grown heavier. At that moment, Nagi, Maria, and Izumi descended from the cruise ship. A faint green wind surrounded the three of them, slowing their fall. Guard. Maria's elemental power activated, and crystalline rocks floated around their bodies like protective armor. Clearly, they understood that their own abilities weren't enough for a direct fight, so they were focusing on defense. Kaguya turned her attention to Izumi. According to Ren, she was the main force of this battle. Then there was no need to hold back. An ice flower with razor-sharp spikes bloomed beneath her feet, exploding outwards in an instant. Izumi swiftly leaped backward to evade, but... bang! Nagi and Maria weren't so lucky. The two of them were forced back, their protective crystal armor dimming considerably. You're really going all out, huh? Nagi couldn't help but complain. Is she just taking out her anger on us? Nagi, don't say that, Maria sighed. It was obvious that Kaguya was irritated. And the reason was Ren. After all, he had just been interacting with Chika the entire time. Right in front of Kaguya. Anyone could see what was going on. Well, maybe only the two people involved didn't notice. Maria narrowed her eyes at Kaguya. The frozen sea is Shinamiya-san's domain. Watch out for ice spikes rising from the ground. Just as she said that, Kaguya conjured an ice bow. Nagi, dodge. Maria's expression changed as she saw Kaguya's next move. She quickly condensed a rock spear from her elemental power. Bang! Ice and rock clashed, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The moment Izumi landed, countless talismans shot out from her kimono sleeves. Boom! The talismans detonated as soon as they neared their target. A massive crater exploded across the frozen battlefield. And, among the shattered ice shards, Kaguya's body lay in pieces. Even Izumi was momentarily stunned. But something felt off. Kaguya's physical state wasn't right. Elementalization made her immune to physical attacks. The technique Izumi had used was more of a test than a lethal strike. It shouldn't have had such an effect. Suddenly, a hand shot out from beneath the ice. It latched onto Izumi's ankle, tight. She stumbled. Looking up, an ice spear rose from below, aiming straight for her. Without hesitation, Izumi pulled out a talisman and constructed a barrier to block the attack. Ding ding. The ice spear clashed against the barrier, momentarily stopping. But, crack, crack. The barrier began to fracture under the relentless assault. It wouldn't last long. The attacks were coming too fast. Just as Izumi was about to figure out an escape plan, another hand emerged from the ice. This one aimed straight for her chest. A cold white glow radiated from it. Shit. Instinctively, she raised both hands and poured spiritual energy into them. Bang. A sudden shockwave blasted her backward. She barely stabilized herself in midair, regaining her footing. Looking back, even the barrier itself had been completely frozen. This cold. It's insane. For the first time, she was overwhelmed. Her hands had turned purple from frostbite. The sleeves of her kimono were completely frozen stiff. Ha! From above, Nagi, still airborne, gathered a massive amount of elemental energy into a blade. Swinging downward, she slashed at the frozen battlefield. The wind sword cut clean through the floating ice. But before the severed ice chunks could even drift apart, they were already refrozen. This is ridiculous. Still hovering in midair, Nagi let out a frustrated sigh. The frozen sea was simply too advantageous for Kaguya. As long as she had enough cold energy, the battlefield would remain completely under her control. Chapter 176, Is it because of me? This is completely one-sided. Sefirah hadn't expected this outcome at all. From her perspective, Nagi-chan had become terrifying, effortlessly slicing through the floating ice on the sea. However, the tricky part was that the split ice quickly froze back together. Even in this situation, she could see that Kaguya had the upper hand due to the terrain. Shinamiya's abilities are already strong, and she still has the advantage of terrain. So this morning exercise wasn't meant for Shinamiya, but for Sanzan-in and Miss Maria instead. Ren pointed at the two who were still struggling. If they were pushed to a near-desperate state, their visions wouldn't be able to extract elemental power according to their own will. The key for Sanzan-in and Miss Maria is learning how to better convert external power into elemental power through their visions. Additionally, the long-term conversion and use of elemental power will also affect their physical fitness. It will make their bodies more accustomed to elemental power. This was the reason why the original gods were known as substitute gods in the other world. Each original god could grow stronger, not just remain as star-level figures like in the game. And what fueled their growth was elemental power. More precise control, stronger elemental power, and a more adaptable body. These were all factors that allowed the original gods to surpass substitute gods. However, the true driving force behind the growth of an original god was their will. Original gods existed because mortals' wishes were recognized by the divine. That was why visions existed. Pure wishes could fuel the growth of an original god. Likewise, pure wishes could also strengthen a vision. A completely one-sided battle was more likely to trigger the growth of Sanzan-in, Nagi and Maria's visions. And in fact, that was exactly what was happening. Compared to when they started, their elemental power was more focused, and their control had improved significantly. Oppressive style training? Well, I guess it does fit the definition of morning exercise. Though it seemed a bit extreme, Sefirah had gained a new perspective on what morning exercise meant. From an observer's point of view, Nagi was truly giving it her all right now. But there was something else Sefirah was more concerned about. Isn't Shinamiya being a little too ruthless? Right now, Shinamiya completely dominated the fight. This so-called morning exercise was something else entirely. It made her wonder if Shinamiya was going too far. Not really. Ren immediately denied it. Shinamiya may seem cold on the surface, but she wouldn't be cruel to others. If that were the case, she would have attacked the Shinamiya clan the moment she obtained her power. That's true. Sefirah thought about it and agreed. But just then, she saw three massive ice hands rise from beneath the ice and quickly grab the three struggling figures. Crack. In an instant, the three were encased in ice. Sefirah was dumbfounded. This is supposed to be mercy? Ren was also a bit surprised at the scene before him. There was no real danger to Nagi, Maria, and Izumi, just as he had said earlier. Kaguya wouldn't be unnecessarily cruel. The ice was transparent, indicating that the freezing wasn't severe. And through his spiritual vision, he could tell that only their etheric states had weakened slightly. They were merely immobilized. Still, even with that reassurance, Ren found himself surprised. Because in his estimation, Shinamiya shouldn't have been this impulsive. Besides, Nagi had helped her before. It didn't make sense for her to act so aggressively. This went against the restraint she had been taught. What had provoked Shinamiya? Ren couldn't help but wonder. She had been perfectly fine these past few days. Neither excited nor particularly emotional. Even if this was her first major battle, it shouldn't have made her react this way. Had she not been provoked before but rather just now? That would mean. Was it Chika? Or me? There were only two possible answers, but that only made Ren feel even more perplexed. He glanced sideways at Chika, who was still covering her mouth in amazement while recording the scene. Then, he shook his head slightly. It shouldn't be Chika. She hadn't done anything that would irritate Shinamiya. Her earlier reactions had only been responses to Ren's brief explanations of her situation. That left only one possibility. Was it me? After ruling out other possibilities, that was the only answer left. Ren quickly thought of something. Could it be that Shinamiya really likes me? That conclusion left him momentarily stunned. Seriously? Wasn't Shinamiya supposed to be completely ignorant about relationships? Could she really accept a boy getting close to her so easily? Knowing her personality and circumstances, Ren found this thought even more confusing. When he first met Kaguya, she had been as cold as ice. But now, had that ice melted so quickly? Had he done something to break through her defenses? As Ren pondered these questions, the three massive ice hands slowly lifted the frozen figures onto the deck of the cruise ship. Bang! The loud impact snapped Ren out of his thoughts. One of the ice hands unfurled, and a sphere of ice rolled to the ground, gradually revealing Kaguya once more. Looking at the three she had frozen, Kaguya's expression flickered with a trace of unease. She slowly walked over and dispelled the freezing energy. Crack! The ice shattered instantly, and the three freed individuals instinctively began rubbing their hands for warmth. Hiss. Nagi, whose body was naturally weaker, had been frozen directly against her skin. You're too ruthless. Seeing Nagi, who had helped her earlier, frozen like this, a faint trace of guilt appeared on Kaguya's face. Sorry, Ms. Sanzanin. I lost control for a moment. Lost control, my foot. You are clearly taking out your frustrations on us. Knowing full well what had happened, Nagi could only grumble internally. She rolled her eyes at Kaguya, who was offering a slow apology, and could only accept her bad luck. I'll accept the apology, but now's not the time for that. Just pour us some hot water already, we're freezing. Chapter 177, Best Friend Hiss. After taking a sip of hot water, the warmth spread through her cold body, bringing her back to life. Nagi let out a deep breath, feeling like she had been resurrected. Nagi, how did your first battle feel? You're not even concerned about whether I was scared? Instead, you're asking how I felt? Hearing the question, Nagi rolled her eyes at the idiot who asked it. But Sakuya didn't care in the slightest. No matter how ruthless Shinomiya is, do you really think she'd kill you on the spot? Even if she was agitated, in the end, all she did was restrain you. The final scene had been a bit intense, but it wasn't enough to cause any real trouble. Left with no retort, Nagi simply adjusted her grip on the cup and gave a small nod. It was thrilling. Using power is completely different from playing a game. But after the excitement, reality hit her. Controlling elemental power is way harder than I thought. After that last attack, I barely had any elemental energy left. I couldn't even keep myself airborne. Speaking of battle experience. Well, as expected, Shinomiya's ability is just too broken. Nagi couldn't help but complain about Kaguya's power. Yeah, just eating a devil fruit gave her an absurd amount of power. The imbalance between effort and reward is just ridiculous. Even Izumi couldn't help but comment. Elementalization. No wonder Amamiya-san called it the strongest among Logia fruits. Maria now truly understood the weight of the word strongest. Elementalization was simply too overwhelming. If an opponent didn't have a way to counter it, they were essentially powerless against it. It was easily one of the strongest abilities. To deal with someone like that, we'd have to use non-physical attacks. Ah. Nagi suddenly paused, her gaze shifting toward Ran. Actually, we do have someone who fits that description. Someone who isn't afraid of elementalization at all and could neutralize any unnatural power. Ah. Izumi covered her mouth involuntarily. I see. Maria let out a small sigh, shaking her head. No wonder we only had morning exercises today. It looks like Amamiya-san is setting us up to face Ms. Mori next. The first time, we experienced despair. Next time, it'll be Shinomiya who feels despair. No. Maybe it'll be even worse than that. Nagi's expression turned grim. Mori's physical strength is absurd, but her abilities don't rely on magic power. If she grabs me and punches me. Just imagining Ran's fist, about the size of a sandbag, slamming into her stomach made Sanzanin Nagi's scalp tingle. The worst part was that elementalization wouldn't work against her. It would be completely nullified. Despair in an entirely different sense. Izumi sighed helplessly. Ever since she and Nagi had entered this circle, their abilities seemed weaker and weaker in comparison. Only Nagi and Maria were still relatively close in power, while everyone else felt like they had literal cheat codes. By the way, where's Amamiya-san? Now that she thought about it, they hadn't seen Ren for a while. Izumi looked around but found no trace of him. Oh, him? He went to talk to Shinomiya, apparently. Sakuya's words made the three of them freeze for a moment before realization dawned on them. He figured it out. Meanwhile, in another room, Kaguya had already calmed down. But what was frustrating her now was the annoying person beside her who kept trying to comfort her. Even worse, this annoying person didn't realize that they were the cause of her emotional instability and yet they kept muttering words of reassurance. Well, about Nagi-chan. Kaguya, I'll go with you to apologize. Nagi-chan isn't unreasonable. I doubt she'll hold a grudge. After all, this was Kaguya's first real battle against something supernatural, right? Mistakes are bound to happen. Although the words were meant to be kind, they only gave Kaguya a headache. Because the person who caused her mistake was this woman. The real problem was, This woman was her best friend. And she was still standing there, trying to comfort her. What was she supposed to do? Watching Kaguya's helpless expression, I simply stood silently by her side. Knock, knock, knock. Hearing the knock at the door, Hayasaka turned back to check with the two ladies. After receiving a nod of confirmation, she opened the door. As expected, the person responsible for Miss Kaguya's emotional turmoil stood before her. Hayasaka-san. Please come in. Miss Kaguya is waiting for you. Before Ren could even finish speaking, Hayasaka stepped aside to let him in, lying without hesitation. The two people in the room froze for a moment. Then, they watched as a visibly stiff Ren stepped inside. Chika immediately left Kaguya's side, abandoning her attempts to comfort her and rushed to Ren. This made Kaguya, who had just been sitting with a dignified posture, freeze completely. Amamiya, Kaguya's mistake earlier was probably just because it was her first real fight, right? I think so. Under normal circumstances, Ren would have agreed without hesitation. But now, knowing the truth, he hesitated. Especially when he noticed Shinamiya glaring at Fujiwara with terrifying intensity. That only confirmed his earlier suspicions. Fujiwara, I need to talk to Shinamiya. We need to have a proper conversation with Kaguya. Chika nodded decisively. She didn't really understand supernatural things, so it made sense to let Amamiya handle it. With that, Chika literally shoved Ren toward Kaguya. Then, she grabbed Hayasaka, who was still processing everything, and pulled her out of the room, leaving behind one last sentence. Amamiya, make sure to properly talk to Kaguya. It was just a mistake, don't overthink it. At that moment, Kaguya, who had just been glaring at Chika with intense hostility, suddenly snapped back to reality. Her expression softened. The hostility in her eyes vanished entirely. Even in the face of this abrupt change, a hint of surprise flickered across Kaguya's face. At this moment, Kaguya reaffirmed one undeniable truth. She and Fujiwara really were best friends. Chapter 178, the two of them sat in silence for a long time. Ren took the initiative to break the ice. Shinamiya-san. Do you like me? The abrupt question completely crashed Kaguya's brain. Amamiya, why would you suddenly think that? Even without looking in a mirror, she knew her expression must be incredibly stiff right now. Well, I just thought of it. Ren observed Kaguya's reaction, and his suspicion grew stronger. Before today's club activity, you weren't emotionally affected by anything. Based on what I know about you, you wouldn't get overly excited in your first battle. You have an unbelievable talent and all the necessary conditions to test your abilities. You might not know your upper limit, but you can control your lower limit. Having spent enough time with Kaguya, Ren was confident in his assessment. If you couldn't control your maximum output, you would have at least kept it within a manageable range. But in the end, you still lost control. That's not like you. So someone must have influenced you. And that led him back to his initial conclusion. Ren watched as Kaguya averted her gaze, clearly guilty. The only possibilities are me. Or Fujiwara. But I know it wasn't Fujiwara. This gave Kaguya a chance to speak. Amamiya-san, why are you so sure it wasn't Fujiwara? Ren looked at her even more strangely. Because I know exactly what your relationship with Fujiwara is like. Sure, Fujiwara affects your mentality a lot, and she does make your brain crash often, but that's always in combination with another person. It's never just her alone that gets to you. In the original story, that other person was Shirogane. But now, that person is me. And you're being affected just the same. To be honest, I wanted to play dumb about it, but I'm terrible at acting. Forget it. Kaguya's mind went completely blank. She wasn't sure how she had acted in the original story, but she had never reacted this way in front of President Shirogane before. Yet somehow, she had done exactly that in front of Ren. No wonder he caught on so quickly. Right now, Kaguya was completely frozen, like a typewriter stuck on a single key, unable to type anything else. Seeing her like this, Ren sighed. Although he had no idea what he had done to crack Kaguya's icy exterior, the current situation spoke for itself. He stepped closer. Shinamiya, let's talk about this. Faced with Ren's serious tone, Kaguya finally responded. Even in her dazed state. Yeah. The two of them found seats and sat across from each other. Another silence settled between them. Shinamiya. How did you start liking me? The temperature on Kaguya's face, which had just returned to normal, immediately started rising again. Calm down. I'm just curious. Ren reassured her before shifting the conversation slightly. I don't have a very high opinion of myself. Maybe that's because of the 16 years I lived in my previous life. And the years I've spent in this one. He first made sure Kaguya had regained some composure before continuing. In my previous life, I was just an ordinary person. My looks and height were probably average at best. My mom used to say I was cute as a kid. She even dressed me up for a wedding photo shoot when I was little, but I never really saw what was so cute about me. In middle school, high school, and college, I was the kind of person who was easy to push around. I learned quickly not to make trouble, because if I did, I was the one who'd get bullied. After graduating college and entering society, I didn't have any particularly outstanding skills. I wasn't good at studying, I lacked ability, and I didn't talk much. And back then, society didn't have much of a place for introverts like me. So I stayed at home. But while I was in school, I had picked up an interest in writing. Notably, writing certain types of novels. I started seriously considering writing as a career. And that's the path I took. Ren couldn't help but feel a bit nostalgic about his old self. Kaguya listened attentively. This was the first time Amamiya had ever talked about his past life. I was really happy when I got paid for my writing for the first time. But since I mostly wrote about things I liked, I never attracted a large audience. And because I spent all my time writing, I had even less interaction with the outside world. I don't remember exactly when I died in my previous life. Maybe it's because the dead don't always realize when they've died. But I do remember knowing, very clearly, that I was alive before it happened. When I opened my eyes again, I already had self-awareness. I could feel the cold around me. I even realized I was a baby. It was an indescribably surreal feeling, even now. Looking back, Ren found it both fascinating and helplessly absurd. Panic and helplessness hit me immediately. No matter what sound I made, all I could do was cry. And when I couldn't cry anymore, I just had to accept it. I was a newborn. I grew up in an orphanage, and I remember everything from that time. When the orphanage shut down when I was 10, I started looking for work, both legal and less legal. At age 11, hoping to find someone willing to hire a kid. In hindsight, I'd say I was pretty lucky. People were kinder in the countryside. After I started making a little money, I rented a place in the countryside, balancing work and school. I was never a great student, but I still had some leftover knowledge from my past life, so I managed. I lived that way until I turned 15. That was the year one got the diary. And for the first time, an ordinary person like me came into contact with the extraordinary world. Chapter 179. This is what Amamiya thinks. Ren found himself recalling the day, a year ago, when he first laid eyes on the diary. The moment he saw it, his mind went blank. He had already been lucky enough to be reborn. How could fate favor him a second time? At that moment, my mind was completely blank. I couldn't understand how someone as ordinary as me could be granted such luck again. So, I didn't use it at first. I only had the mindset of a commoner. I didn't believe in benefits falling from the sky. It took me a year to come to terms with it. At that time, I was transitioning from middle school to high school. There was no decent high school in the small village where I lived, so I moved to a bigger city nearby. Beka City, under Tokyo. A city where murders happen constantly. Because of that, I'd heard that rent was surprisingly cheap in certain areas. It was only after moving to Beka City and finding my current place that I realized I had been accepted into high school. That school was Titan High School. And that's when I understood. I had been reborn into an unbelievable world. At that moment, I started wondering if this world might have other crossovers as well. So I searched the internet. And found a lot of things. Names that should have only existed in fiction were real. When I confirmed the existence of the Sanzanin family, I knew this world wasn't simple. That's when I finally turned my attention to the diary I had been carrying for a year. The world of the god of death was terrifying. If you had no abilities, you could get caught up in something dangerous at any moment. But as it turned out, the trouble that came with the Sanzanin name was even worse. So, if he wanted to survive, he had to make a choice. So it wasn't about avoiding Mori's case files after all. Kaguya recalled how the diary had mentioned wanting to steer clear of the chaos surrounding Kuto. But now, she realized the real reason had been Sanzanin. No matter how much chaos Kuto brings, there's a limit to his involvement. But the mess surrounding the detriment butler is on another level entirely. Even if it's a future event, even if it's only a possibility. It's better to gain a certain level of strength in advance, just in case. That was the first time I seriously considered using the diary. Ren admitted that his anxiety had been what ultimately swayed him. He never believed everything would naturally work out for the best. Sometimes, controlling power meant controlling your own fate. Of course. It also meant the diary might control his fate. But in the end, it was still a choice. A choice between being controlled by the diary. Or being controlled by so-called fate. In the end, he chose the diary. He decided to use the diary without knowing if it had any risks. He boldly and recklessly revealed himself, pushing the diary to its limits. I've read similar stories in my past life. I know that revealing too much information can be dangerous. But I also knew that if I didn't reveal enough, I might not gain anything at all. And you already know what happened after that. Ren paused here. Looking back on my life, I don't think there's anything particularly special about me. Except for the diary. My evaluation of myself has always been the same, ordinary, unremarkable, quiet, and lucky. Otherwise, it was difficult for him to put himself into words. He had already summed himself up as best as he could. Then, he suddenly remembered something Sanoko had once said about him. Maybe in this life, my face is at least decent. I don't really know if there's anything else worth mentioning about me. Hearing this, Kaguya finally understood why Ren was telling her all this. So that's how it was. So, back then, when he talked about the interweaving of fate. At the time, she had assumed he was talking about them. But now, she realized he had been referring to the diary. The so-called interweaving of fate wasn't about them staying together for a long time or developing some kind of special relationship. It was about the diary. At that moment, she had misunderstood Ren's meaning. Now, she understood. This was his view of himself. From the very beginning, he had never thought about forming that kind of connection with them. However, there was one exception. Then, what about Ms. Suzuki? Sanoko? Well, Sanoko is an exception. Why is Ms. Suzuki an exception? Sanoko approached me before she knew about the supernatural. At the very least, I believe she didn't start a relationship with me because of the diary. But she did pursue you. Yes, she did. Kaguya looked into Ren's eyes. She didn't argue. But she also didn't say anything else. That silence made it clear. Ren was certain that Sanoko's interest in him wasn't because of the supernatural. So, she was an exception. The difference in interests between herself, Nagi, and Ren was too great. And Nagi was still too young. If anything, her feelings would probably be dismissed as childish affection. So, in the end, was she only interested because of the mystery? Was that how Ren saw it? So, from the very beginning, his judgment had been made. Kaguya took a deep breath. I won't deny it. When I first saw what was written in the diary, I was curious. But after what happened at Tropical Paradise that afternoon, I started thinking about how I could use the diary to gain more. Ren gave a slight nod. That was the Shinomiya Kaguya he knew. But, Amamiya-san, don't you think you're underestimating yourself? That caught Ren off guard. Underestimating myself. Seeing how completely clueless he looked, Kaguya felt her energy drain away. This man had no self-awareness. The diary is the diary. And you are you. Yes, I was originally interested in the diary. But that doesn't mean I wasn't also interested in you. Huh? For the first time, Ren was completely stunned by Kaguya's words. Chapter 180, The Rights of a Diary. Like you said, maybe the diary was what first connected us. But after that, it was fate. Even I understand that human relationships aren't only built on interests. Kaguya had the right to say this. Just like with Hayasaka. No matter what, she did betray me. But it wasn't because she wanted to. It was because of her identity and family circumstances. By nature, betrayal is something I cannot forgive. Betrayal was her bottom line. After being betrayed once by someone she had considered a friend, she never wanted to experience that feeling again. That had always been Kaguya's standard. But now. But I forgave Hayasaka. She said it plainly. It wasn't out of kindness. It's just that my bottom line isn't the same when it comes to Hayasaka. I gave her an exception. It wasn't about any personal gain. It was because we had known each other for so long, and my bond with her had formed early on. Amamiya, by our logic, my fate with her had already been intertwined long before this. Then, Kaguya turned to face Ren directly. Amamiya, you and I were first connected through the diary. And through shared interests. But to me, Shinomiya Kaguya, you are the exception. Memories of being raised like a canary in the gilded cage that was the Shinomiya family surfaced in her mind. But that cage had been shattered by ice. For the first time, the canary inside had a chance to escape. The diary gave me more than just power. It gave me an opportunity. The Shinomiya family has always been a cage pressing down on me. As long as it exists, I will never be free. Even my own life has been nothing more than a pawn in their plans. A tool for a political marriage. Of course, I understand that this is the price I have to pay for being born into this family. Kaguya wasn't blind to reality. Nor was she someone who avoided responsibility. But if I had the chance to take control of my own fate, that would be ideal. Yet, on my own, I could never achieve that. It was an undeniable fact. A caged bird could not break its own prison. The diary is what gave me the hope of escaping my normal life. So naturally, I wanted more. She did not deny her ambition. But I haven't forgotten who brought me the diary in the first place. Hearing this, Ren blinked. Me? Kaguya looked at him as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Of course you. Who else could it be? Amamiya, you are the owner of the diary. Only you could have brought it to us. Even if the distribution wasn't intentional on your part, we only have access to it because you write in it. The ability to read the diary was given by him. Besides, Amamiya, don't forget one thing. The only reason we have what we do now is because of you. Me? Ren pointed at himself in disbelief. Kaguya nodded, her expression calm as she explained. Everything started after you mentioned the lottery function. Before that, there was no lottery. Even after we read the first diary entry, the diary never told us about it. In other words, the diary never intended to give us anything in the first place. It was only because you mentioned it in the diary that the diary responded to us. Others may not have noticed this, but Kaguya certainly did. That's when I realized it. I was only able to escape the Shinomiya family's cage because you gave me the chance to. If, at that time, you had chosen to keep it a secret, then the diary would have only shown us glimpses of the future. It never would have granted us power. Kaguya's words completely stunned Ren. He hadn't known. He really hadn't realized this. I did that? Unconsciously, Ren ran a hand over his face. He had thought about the diary's reward mechanism before. But he never considered that the only reason it granted them powers was because he had triggered it. I believe this right belongs only to Amamiya-san. It was your unintentional actions that caused the diary to follow your commands. This right was given to us only because you, the writer, allowed it. Kaguya had never believed they had any real authority over the diary. The gains they had received were too disproportionate to what they had contributed. There was no such thing as a benefit granted for no reason. So, she came to a simple conclusion. Ren had accidentally shared his authority. That was how they had met. Perhaps. You could even take that right back now. That statement pulled Ren out of his daze. He chuckled. Maybe this is just another twist of fate. Without realizing it, I created an interweaving of fate. Even my unconscious actions have drawn us together. Just like. Yes, just like them. The Tarot Club. Ren pressed his lips together, keeping the rest of the thought to himself. Instead, he took out his diary. Seems like some things can't be brushed off as coincidences. Did you think of something? No. I don't know anything for sure yet. My intuition isn't giving me any clear signals. If anything, it's telling me that I don't need to know more right now. Shaking his head slightly, Ren let out a small sigh. He really had no way of knowing which events were orchestrated by fate. But one thing is certain. This diary does not intend to harm me. Despite saying this, he still shook the diary in frustration. The only downside is that it never tells me the rules outright and forces me to figure everything out myself. Shinomiya-san, are you saying that because of all this, you believe I saved you from your cage? Just because of that, you developed feelings for me? Shinomiya Kaguya had regained most of her composure, but when the topic shifted back to this, her expression wavered slightly. Like is a strong word. I don't know if it's that kind of emotion. I just find myself paying more attention to you than usual. Whenever I see you interacting with other girls, I feel uncomfortable. Even someone as dense as Ren understood what that meant. Isn't that just jealousy? Chapter 181, Confession. If you think this is jealousy, then just treat it as love. Kaguya gave up her last bit of resistance. Turning her face to the side, she was unwilling, or perhaps afraid to look directly at Ren at this moment. Her fair cheeks were tinged with a faint blush, and her nervous emotions were reflected in her body language. Her fingers had been tightly intertwined for some time now. Right now, the usually cold and composed Kaguya was nowhere to be seen. She was truly beautiful. And unbearably cute. Ren couldn't help but admire her in his heart. But what surprised him even more was that such an adorable girl actually liked him. Shinomiya, thank you for your feelings. Ren expressed his gratitude first. It's just that I'm not sure what kind of love this is. Noticing the slight change in Kaguya's expression, he quickly explained, I mean, I do like you. You're cute, and you have a great personality. From my perspective, I can't see any reason not to like you. I probably liked you in the past too. But I don't know if I still feel the same way now. Kaguya's expression, which had stiffened for a moment, softened slightly. Although Ren's words were a bit ambiguous, she more or less understood his meaning. That is love. Kaguya answered him directly, her voice steady and confident. She recalled her conversation with Hayasaka at home. That time, she had already made up her mind. She couldn't run away anymore. Because she couldn't bear the thought of some other girl holding Ren's hand, smiling at him so intimately. Just imagining it made her feel frustrated beyond words. So this time, she wouldn't hesitate? The emotions surging in her heart, her desire to hold on, her need to monopolize this relationship, suppressed the shyness threatening to hold her back. Amamiya, this is love. I do like you. It was sudden, I know. Maybe it's because you saved me and freed me from my chains. Maybe at first, it was just gratitude, just admiration. But the more I got to know you, the more I wanted to understand you, to learn everything about you. Even to have you all to myself. Kaguya's fiery emotions spilled out in full force. Shinomiya. Ren's eyes weren't just for show. He could clearly see the raw emotions in her gaze, the vulnerability, the longing, the determination. She was laying everything bare, hoping he would accept it. Our fates are intertwined. Kaguya stepped forward and threw herself into Ren's arms. Your original goal was to be our friend? Don't be ridiculous. How can a man and a woman have a pure friendship? Especially us. I know I can't have you all to myself. But I also can't let you go so easily. Her fingers gripped his clothes tightly. Even if you leave, you have to take me with you. I won't let you leave me behind. Don't think you can just walk out of my heart so easily. Ren was silent for a moment, then looked down at Kaguya, whose eyes were slightly red. I won't leave. I don't believe you. Kaguya's emotions were running high. You said our fates are intertwined. Then, even if our relationship becomes something far more special, that would only be natural. Bang. Just as Kaguya declared those words, the door suddenly burst open. The unexpected intrusion startled both of them. Especially Kaguya, who had just made such a bold statement. At the doorway, not only were Chika and Hayasaka sprawled on the floor from falling in, but a whole crowd of people stood behind them, clearly watching the scene unfold. Sanoko, the one who had opened the door, took in the sight of Kaguya gripping Ren's clothes tightly, her expression turning a little complicated. This wasn't quite the situation she had imagined. Ren, standing beside her, shrank back slightly, as if wanting to pretend she had nothing to do with this. You guys. What are you doing? Kaguya's voice trembled. She couldn't believe that everything she had just said had been overheard by these people. We just happened to be passing by. Chika, rubbing her nose after her fall, forced an awkward smile, trying to defuse the situation. Yeah, we were just passing by. Hayasaka straightened her clothes and got up from the floor, her tone utterly deadpan. We definitely didn't hear Miss Kaguya's bold confession. We definitely didn't hear her admit she was jealous of Fujiwara-san. And we most definitely didn't hear her say that she wanted to establish a deeper relationship with Amamiya-san. The entire room fell into a stunned silence. Then, everyone's expressions contorted, trying and failing to hold back their laughter. Especially because all of them had, in fact, heard Kaguya's emotional outburst. And now, seeing her face turning redder than a tomato, they just couldn't hold it in anymore. PFFT. Ha 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 ha. The laughter erupted all at once. Ice Queen, if you wanted to confess, just confess. Don't say things that can be so easily misunderstood. Sanoko shook her head, feeling like she had overestimated Kaguya's courage. She had thought Kaguya was someone who would push through and take things all the way. But after all that build-up and tension, it turned out to be just a confession? If she had known that, she wouldn't have even bothered opening the door. But then again, it wasn't her fault. Who told Kaguya to say something as dangerously misleading as I want to establish a deeper relationship with you during a confession? How could anyone not misunderstand? As Sanoko's words landed, the room exploded into even louder laughter. Meanwhile, Hayasaka let out a small sigh, looking at her lady with a mixture of exasperation and disappointment. Miss Kaguya. You finally built up the courage to be bold. But couldn't you have been just a little more straightforward? You know Ren is completely clueless in these matters. If you had just gone for it earlier, wouldn't it have been better? In Hayasaka's opinion, this moment had been the perfect opportunity for her lady. But even with such an ideal setup, Kaguya still couldn't fully seize the moment. Though the result was disappointing, I also understood something. This was probably Kaguya's limit. Expecting her to be any more aggressive in this kind of situation was probably unrealistic. At the very least, in matters of romance, both Kaguya and Ren were equally inexperienced. In a way, they were each other's first love. Chapter 182, Training begins after finishing their morning exercises. All members of the Occult Research Club disembarked from the boat and stepped onto the island. Walking along the 1,500-meter-long ice path, they made their way inland. I can smell sulfur. As they approached, the distinct scent of sulfur from volcanic activity hit them. However, due to the time elapsed since the last eruption, the smell was actually quite faint. Following the ice path, they officially set foot on the beach, and the island's interior came into view. It was far quieter than expected. There wasn't even the sound of birds or insects. This island is really quiet. Sefirah perked up her ears, but she could barely pick up any sounds. Miss Aizawa, you don't need to strain yourself. This island really is silent. Seeing her reaction, Ran explained, the sounds on this island are unusual. It feels like there are bubbling noises coming from all around. With her enhanced senses, Ran couldn't hear much else, but the strange, sticky bubbling sounds were incredibly distinct. Bubbling sounds. Could it be hot springs? Sanoko was momentarily taken aback and tried to picture the scene Ran had described. She herself couldn't hear the bubbling, but she had noticed something strange. After stepping onto the island, even the sound of waves had become faint. It's not coming from hot springs. Ren shook his head slightly, his gaze fixed on the ground. This island sits on top of a large volcano. That kind of bubbling sound is actually pretty normal. Everyone suddenly paused and looked down at the ground at the same time. The deep trench surrounding the island flashed through their minds. Now that they thought about it, the island really did resemble a volcano emerging from the sea. Shinomiya, you really have a knack for shopping. You bought a volcano when you bought an island. Sanoko nudged Kaguya playfully, teasing her. Kaguya glanced at Ran, who was standing in front of her, and hesitantly asked, Amamiya, will this volcano interfere with our training? No. Ren shook his head slightly. He had already observed the volcano in detail. The island was indeed formed on top of it, but the volcanic pressure was minimal. Although this island is situated on a volcano, the pressure within the volcano itself is not very high. It's located within a tectonic plate zone, and at most, it experiences 2 minor eruptions per year. The eruptions are relatively small in scale. The magma release never extends beyond the island itself, it physically can't. That's its limit. For this volcano to erupt more violently, someone would have to inject explosive energy directly into the magma chamber. Otherwise, it won't pose any real threat. This volcano was extremely stable. The eruptions, occurring twice a year, were small scale. Based on its current state, the next eruption was still months away. Clearly, this training session wouldn't be affected. The reason this island is so quiet is because the local wildlife understands its dangers instinctively. Animals are often the first to react before a disaster. The insects on this island have already hidden deep underground, where it's safe. They won't re-emerge until the volcanic cycle is over. And because the insects disappeared, the birds left as well. They lost their primary food source. So, all that remains is the bubbling of magma beneath us. The others nodded subconsciously. But normal human senses wouldn't be able to pick up the sound of magma bubbling beneath a volcano. Yeah, I can't hear it at all. Ren pointed out matter-of-factly. Ran, your physical abilities and senses have almost reached their limits, haven't they? Yes. Ran nodded slightly, a troubled look appearing on her face. Sometimes I hear things too clearly, which makes daily life a little inconvenient. This is likely due to your lack of control over your own strength and focus. Right now, your body is radiating energy outward. While it's technically a form of physical enhancement, at this level, it's essentially a supernatural ability. Physical strengthening naturally leads to heightened sensory perception. If one can't control it, it becomes more of a burden than a benefit. But this time, things were different. The River of Eternal Darkness, which Ren obtained from the incident on Tsukekage Island, could grant power along the warrior path. This was the key to helping Ren gain full mastery over her abilities. Amamiya Ren waved her over. The goal of this training is mainly for Shinomiya and Ran to master the upper limits of their power. Meanwhile, Sanzan-in and Ms. Maria need to learn how to control their elemental abilities. So, we'll split into 2 groups. Hayasaka, open the door and take Fujiwara and Shinomiya to the other world. Let Shinomiya vent inside your spatial realm and release as much of her cold energy as possible. We need to see if her ice fruit abilities put a strain on your dimensional space. As for the outside, Ran, Sanzan-in, and Miss Maria will take charge here. Next, Ran. Upon hearing her name, Ran stepped forward. This time, I have a way to help you control your strength. But it'll take time to test and I'll need to regulate how the power is given to you. Otherwise, it could cause unforeseen complications. Do you want to give it a try? Ran nodded without hesitation. Of course I do. Chapter 183, Are You Jealous Again? In the dense jungle, a girl moved swiftly through the terrain. Darting across the forest floor, she leaped onto a tree branch with a light, effortless step. With barely a pause, she pushed off, her body soaring upward. In just 3 seconds, she had reached the treetop, allowing her to survey the area ahead at a glance. It's amazing. It feels like this has been ingrained in my body for ages. This is a boon. A small flame ignited on a nearby branch, and as the fire flickered, another figure appeared. It's fine if the boon I grant others is of a low sequence, but once the sequence becomes too high, Your growth trajectory will inevitably start leaning toward me. Leaning? What do you mean? To put it simply, the more powerful the boon, the more you will become like me. Eventually, you'll turn into something akin to my dependent. A puppet, to be blunt. Oh. Ran was momentarily stunned. She hadn't expected such a heavy price for obtaining Ran's power. But then, with a troubled expression, she asked, if you take the power back, will all of this training still count? Ran smiled slightly. He had considered this issue beforehand. Don't worry. Right now, you're using the knowledge gained from the boon to familiarize yourself with your body. Once you've fully adapted, I'll retrieve the gifted power. But I'll leave behind your physical memory of it. For now, your main focus should be on mastering the overwhelming strength, essentially, learning the technique. Although you won't maintain your current level exactly, after proper training, you'll be able to regain this level of strength on your own. This was the best method Ran could think of to help Ran master her abilities. The process was tedious and complex, but it avoided any dangerous side effects. Compared to the potion pathway, the boon pathway was far more stable. Especially when dealing with low-sequence boons. Ran, test your power. Understood. Ran leaped down from the treetop. Her movements were fluid, and she descended from a height of dozens of meters almost instantly. Not a single sound accompanied her landing. She had reached a level where she could ascend and descend extreme heights with ease, utilizing her body weight and technique perfectly. As soon as she landed, Ran turned around and struck a massive tree behind her, a tree so large it would take 7 or 8 people to encircle it. A sharp tearing sound echoed through the jungle. Ran's seemingly delicate hand effortlessly pierced through the tree's tough outer bark and even penetrated its dense core. Exhaling softly, Ran swiftly pulled her hand out, clenched her fist, and struck again, this time with a full force punch. Boom. The massive tree exploded as if someone had stuffed it with TNT. With a loud rumble, the splintered trunk collapsed to the side. Not bad. Your strength and technique are both solid. As flames flickered, Ran descended, placing a hand on the fractured remains of the tree trunk. Just from examining the damage, he could tell how terrifying Ran's strength had become. That was about 70% of your power, right? Only 40%. Ran corrected him, her cheeks tinged with pink. Even though Ran had overestimated her power, the reality was even more astonishing. If just 40% of her strength was enough to cause this level of destruction. By his calculations, that strike could easily pierce through a human body. The phrase kill with a single punch was not an exaggeration. Even with the warrior pathway enhancing her, low-sequence augmentations had limits. But considering Ran's base physical strength, even without the warrior pathway's enhancements, she could likely still kill with a single punch. In terms of sheer brute force, normal humans were simply no match for her. However, there was one important thing to celebrate. You can control your power, you know your limits now, right? Yeah. Ran nodded enthusiastically. Although my grasp of it is still a little vague, after receiving Ran's power, I now have a clearer understanding of my upper limit. This is probably my biggest achievement so far. Ran let out a relieved breath. He was never worried about Ran growing too strong. Rather, he was worried that she'd become too strong before she was mentally ready for it. After all, the world was full of terrible people. If Ran ever encountered someone insulting her in a fight, she might instinctively lash out and accidentally obliterate them. Now then. Shinomiya and Hayasaka. Crack. Suddenly, the sound of shattering rang out from the distance. Ran's senses screamed in alarm. Reacting instantly, he grabbed Ran, who hadn't even processed what was happening yet, and teleported several times using flame jumps. Boom. A massive explosion erupted behind them, sending a thunderous shockwave through the air. Bzzzzzzzzzzz. A powerful buzzing noise filled the surroundings, causing Ran's ears to ring violently. For a brief moment, his hearing was completely wiped out. And if he was struggling, then Ran, with her far more sensitive senses, must be suffering twice as much. It took a few moments for the ringing in their ears to subside. Only then could Ran finally take in the sight before him. A massive iceberg had suddenly materialized in the middle of the island. As if an entire glacier had been dropped from the sky. Looks like the Door Fruit's alternate dimension has its limits, after all. Ran swiftly used his ability to help Ran recover from the sensory overload. Ran, now regaining her senses, also took in the jaw-dropping scene. Did something happen to Shinomiya? Ran put her down and shook his head. It's not Shinomiya. It's Hayasaka. The Door Fruit still has restrictions. Judging by this, they're running into serious trouble in that other dimension. Ran, now steady on her feet, lightly nudged Ran. Don't tell me. Shinomiya got jealous again? Ran turned to look at her. Even though Shinomiya's abilities were mainly ice-based, Ran's body had been enhanced to its absolute peak, resulting in a figure even more stunning than Fujiwara Chika's. If Shinamiya saw this and got jealous, it wouldn't exactly be surprising. Not impossible. Ran smirked playfully. After all, Shinamiya loves getting jealous. It's totally possible. This time, even Ren wasn't entirely sure. Ran, I'm heading over to check on them. Can you handle things here? I'll be fine. But wait. Are we still continuing? I'll check on the situation first. Chapter 184, Saving the Beauty Beneath the Iceberg. Puff, puff, puff. Climbing out from beneath the snow, Sakuya spat out the dust that had found its way into her mouth. What the hell is going on? Looking up, she saw that the entire island was now covered by an enormous layer of ice. Oh my god. An iceberg fell down? Sakuya's face went blank with shock. The whole island seemed to have been buried beneath the massive ice formation. If not for the smoke rising from the crater in the distance, one might have thought even the volcano had been affected. Her chaotic thoughts gradually settled as she took in the scene before her, piecing together the situation. This is Shinamiya's doing again, isn't it? No, it's not Shinamiya. It's her maid. Sanoko, who had also just crawled out of the snow, shook her head slightly. Chika, Shinamiya, and her maid all went to another dimension. This kind of iceberg suddenly crashing down can only mean something went wrong over there. It's probably because her maid couldn't handle Shinamiya's outburst in that other dimension. Sakuya nodded in understanding. That sounds about right. Spatial abilities are convenient, but there's definitely a limit to how much they can withstand. The Door fruit was indeed a unique ability, but even something that special must have its limits. At the very least, they now knew that such a limit did, in fact, exist. It's good that we figured this out now. At least I won't make the same mistake in the future. Yet, as she looked at the massive iceberg covering the entire island, Aizawa Sakuya couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then, it suddenly hit her. Wait. Nagi and Maria are still on the island. Her eyes widened in realization. She had been so caught up in analyzing the situation that she had completely forgotten about them. And ran. Izumi, who had remained silent up until now, didn't seem concerned in the slightest. Don't worry. Her voice was as calm and gentle as ever, effortlessly soothing the nerves of those around her. Amamiya-sama won't just sit back and do nothing in a situation like this. Besides, Ms. Maria's shield can handle this kind of scenario. Nagi will be fine. All we need to do is wait here. Izumi's steady and reassuring tone had an immediate effect, easing Sakuya and Sanoko's anxiety. Indeed, the situation was urgent. But the people they knew wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. They had to have made some kind of preparation for an emergency like this. At worst, it would just be a little troublesome to deal with. And sure enough, beneath the iceberg, in a dim and suffocating space, Maria was desperately holding up a shelter using rock elemental energy. Sweat dripped down her face as she continuously squeezed out every last bit of her elemental power. All she could do now was hold on for just a little longer. She knew that Amamiya would definitely come. Maria. The space was nearly pitch black, but Nagi could imagine just how exhausted Maria must be right now. Then, all of a sudden, a burst of fire flared to life in the darkness, illuminating Maria and Nagi's faces. A new figure had appeared in the confined space. He immediately took in Maria's condition and, without hesitation, reached out grabbing Maria with one hand and Nagi with the other. In an instant, they vanished in a flash of fire. The space, now devoid of elemental support, collapsed the very next moment. Above the iceberg, flames erupted as three figures emerged safely. Phew. After bringing Nagi and Maria out of danger, Ren let out a slow breath. He was relieved that he had come to check on them first. If he had arrived even half a minute later, they wouldn't have lasted. Ren silently thanked his intuition. A faint whimper pulled him back to reality. Gently stabilizing Maria's exhausted body in his arms, he let her lean against him. Using the Soul Assurer's power, he first soothed her emotions, then infused her with a small amount of spiritual energy, helping to restore her depleted elemental power. As the spirituality entered her, Maria's vision began to glow faintly once more. Little by little, the elemental energy inside her started circulating again, gradually revitalizing her body. Maria's breathing steadied, her complexion regaining some color. When she finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Ren's face. Closer than expected. She let out a sigh of relief. Looks like I held out long enough. Yeah. Ren gave a small nod. You did well. How does it feel to push your vision to the absolute limit? Maria recalled the sensation from earlier, and her face immediately twisted with discomfort. Horrible. It's like trying to squeeze out the last drop of water from a completely dry sponge, except the sponge itself feels like it's going to tear apart. Yeah, that's how it is for any power when you push it too far. Ren chuckled, well aware of that sensation himself. Seeing him smile, Maria couldn't help but smile back. Then, her gaze shifted toward the frozen landscape around them. Miss Shinomiya really overdid it this time. Ren, however, didn't think so. Well, I did tell her to release her power freely. Part of it was to test the limits of Hayasaka's other dimensional space. And part of it was to let Shinomiya fully unleash her strength, so that she herself could understand the boundaries of her current abilities. That said, he did feel a bit guilty about one thing. I probably should have reminded her to aim at the sea instead of the island. If this had happened near the water, the damage would have been much more contained. After a brief moment of rest, Ren turned to Nagi, who had also calmed down. Sanzanin, you okay? I'm fine. Maria was the one holding everything together. Her voice was quiet, her lips pressed together tightly. Ren could sense her frustration. Smiling, he reached out and gently placed a hand on her head. Ms. Maria is safe now, so don't blame yourself for feeling powerless. Just get stronger in the future. Yeah. Reaching up, Nagi wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, feeling just a little bit better. Chapter 185, Ren, are you and Shinomiya dating? Sanzanin, help take care of Miss Maria. I still need to find Shinomiya and the others. I don't know what condition they're in right now. Ren was genuinely worried about their situation. Nagi gave a small nod and moved to support Maria in his place. You two rest here. I'll be back after I check things out. Got it. Seeing Nagi behaving so obediently, Ren felt a bit more at ease. In the next instant, he disappeared in a burst of flames. Using divination, Ren had already pinpointed Shinomiya and the others' location. After a few consecutive flame jumps, he arrived at the site of the incident. What he saw upon arrival made his heart tighten. Kaguya, Hayasaka, and Chika had all collapsed, unconscious. Without hesitation, Ren rushed to check on Chika first. Looks like she just fainted from shock. Using spiritual vision, he examined her and found no physical injuries. Just a faint discoloration at the top of her etheric body, indicating mental exhaustion. Confirming that, Ren sighed in relief. Among the three, Chika was the weakest. If even she had only fainted, then Kaguya and Hayasaka were likely not in critical condition either. Next, he turned to Hayasaka. Her etheric body was also slightly faded at the top, suggesting that she had passed out from shock just like Chika. However, unlike Chika, Hayasaka's spirit body had suffered some damage. So, when the alternate dimension created by the door fruit collapses beyond its limit, it also affects the user's spirit body. A mental impact, plus the shock-induced unconsciousness. A double blow. Taking a deep breath, Ren focused on stabilizing her condition. As he channeled his soul assurer abilities, Hayasaka's expression gradually relaxed. Ren let out another sigh. The extraordinary traits of the soul assurer really come in handy. Placing Hayasaka next to Chika, he then turned his attention to Kaguya. She, too, was lying unconscious on the ice. Just like the other two, there were no major injuries. She had simply passed out from the overwhelming impact. So, the alternate dimension created by the door fruit isn't as invincible as it seems. Thinking about it, this made sense. If the door fruit had the power to trap people indefinitely, it would be an unbeatable ability in battle. But clearly, the alternate dimension it created had its limits. It couldn't withstand excessive force. Ren's gaze lowered to Kaguya in his arms. Her spirit body is weakened. She must have completely exhausted her current control over the ice fruit. She hasn't fully mastered it yet, but she pushed herself to the absolute limit before she collapsed. As for the door fruit, it's still effective at locking people inside. But unless its ability is further developed, it can only trap those weaker than the user. With that thought, Ren lifted Kaguya into his arms and vanished in a burst of fire. This wasn't a place to linger. He needed to bring them to safety first, then return to gather the others. At the entrance of the island, 3 people waited anxiously. Suddenly, a burst of flames signaled Ren's arrival. Amamiya-sama. Izumi immediately stepped forward, the concern on her face evident. She was no longer as composed as before. Don't worry, Sanzanin and Maria are fine. Ren's words instantly reassured her, and she visibly relaxed. Ren, is Shinomiya okay? Seeing him carrying Kaguya in his arms, Sanoko hurried over. She's fine too. When the alternate dimension created by the door fruit collapsed, the impact was immense. The 3 of them were knocked unconscious from the shock. Physically, she's completely unharmed. Hearing this, Sanoko finally let out a relieved sigh. She glanced down at Kaguya, still in Ren's arms. This woman really moves fast. Even in a situation like this, she was a step ahead of the rest. Sanoko admitted it. Kaguya was far more formidable than she had initially thought. And she didn't want anything to happen to her over something like this. Sanoko, take care of Shinomiya. I need to go back and get Fujiwara and Hayasaka. Ren moved closer, preparing to hand Kaguya over. Sanoko nodded and carefully took Kaguya from his arms. However, she wasn't exactly strong, so all she could do was help Kaguya sit down on the ground slowly. After making sure she was settled, Ren turned and vanished once again. The next ones to be retrieved were Hayasaka and Chika. Since both were unconscious, he had to transport them one at a time. Finally, he returned for Nagi and Maria. Fortunately, they were both awake and able to walk on their own, so he simply guided them carefully. The last person waiting was Ran. Sorry for the wait. It wasn't that long. Ran shook her head slightly. It really hadn't felt like much time had passed. How are Shinomiya and the others? They just fainted. Ren's expression was visibly relieved. Hayasaka's spirit took a bit of damage, but it's nothing serious. Fujiwara just passed out. As for Shinomiya, she not only lost consciousness but also drained herself mentally. I think she released all the power she could control in the alternate dimension, and when it collapsed, she was caught in the backlash. Understanding the reason, Ran finally relaxed. For a moment there, she had almost thought Kaguya had done this out of jealousy. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, she asked, "So, Ran, does this mean you and Shinomiya are dating now?" "Well, I wouldn't say that." Ren thought about it for a moment before shaking his head. Ran's eyes widened. "But she confessed to you, didn't she? Doesn't that count?" That confession was interrupted. Ren sighed. "I do understand Shinomiya's feelings for me. Maybe they're the same as Sanoko's feelings for me. But for me, I feel like I need to respond to them properly before we can officially call it a relationship." There were things he still needed to make clear. Huh. Ran placed her hands behind her back, her expression thoughtful. "So, if someone else confesses to you in the future, would you still accept it?" Chapter 186, Ran's advice. Ran, the real issue isn't whether I'd accept it, it's whether anyone would actually confess to me. In response to the question, Ran gave a helpless explanation. "To be honest, I like all of you. But I also feel a certain distance between us. That's the difference between liking someone from a distance and liking someone in reality." Ren had always had a kind of filter for these girls. For heroines he'd only seen through a screen, he naturally liked most of them. That was only normal. After all, who wouldn't like a heroine that's cute and kind? But now, having the chance to meet them in person, Ren couldn't help feeling hesitant. Saying "I love you," my waifu online was easy. Anyone could do it. But saying it offline? And now, those heroines he once admired through the screen were standing right in front of him. Real, living people. It made spouting nonsense far more difficult. Ren had once dreamed of being the protagonist. But in the end, he was just a regular guy, not someone with protagonist-level charm. Even now, he was at most just an ordinary person with a cheat. Who would have thought his relationship with these heroines would become this complicated? That someone might genuinely fall in love with him? It all felt like something out of a dream. How could something this good happen in reality? That sounds kind of awkward. Ran probably understood what Ren was trying to say. But in the end, you'd still accept it if someone confessed to you, right? Yeah. Ren hesitated but didn't deny it. It's just hard to imagine something like that actually happening. All of you are amazing girls, there's no need to say much about your looks, background, or personality. It just doesn't feel real that people like you would fall for someone like me. Like Shinomiya and Sanoko. They're both beautiful, have great personalities, and come from strong family backgrounds. Anyone would pursue girls like them. So why would they like me? Ren felt genuinely confused. If it were because of power or status, I could understand. But they're not acting that way at all. So I can't just brush it off with a half-hearted response. Just like with Okino Yoko. If she had simply seen through his special qualities and thought he could help her, Ren would have been able to accept that. But that wasn't how she acted at all. At first, it felt like she was simply repaying a debt of gratitude. But over time, they grew closer. Like genuine friends. And eventually, that relationship evolved again. Was it sincere? Even if Ren didn't fully trust his own emotions, he still believed in his ability to read sincerity. That was what made it all the more confusing. He didn't understand why these girls were being sincere with him. But there was one thing he did understand. Because their feelings were real, he couldn't respond carelessly. I get it now. Ran's lips curled into a soft smile. Her hands were behind her back as she spoke. She understood what Ren was struggling with. Aside from feeling awkward, the real issue was that he simply couldn't believe it. And to be fair, she wouldn't believe it either if she were in his shoes. But the good news was, it wasn't something he couldn't accept. Ren, I think you just need to treat this more seriously. At least, I think everyone else is serious about it. Yeah. I can feel that too. Also, Ren. You're the one who said we could pursue immortality together. How are we supposed to accept anyone casually with that mindset? Ah. Ren suddenly realized. He did say something like that before. And anyone who obtained the diary would most likely gain immortality in the future. That did indeed set him apart from everyone else. Immortals walk together with immortals. Immortals pursue love with other immortals. Did you forget that, Ren? Ren kept pressing the point. This was key. Yeah. I guess I kinda forgot. Hearing that, Ren rolled her eyes. Seriously. You're the one who reminded us to remember that, but you're also the one who forgot it. Sorry. The issue of longevity really had slipped his mind. After all, he was only 16 years old, and not yet truly an immortal. It was easy to forget he would eventually become one. The values of immortals couldn't be measured by normal standards. The lifespan of an immortal was simply too long. There's that. But there's also the issue of love. Everyone likes you sincerely. Ran cut off Ran's spiraling thoughts before they could go off track again. I don't think girls would fall for someone just because they're immortal. If anything, after learning they live much longer in the future, they'd be even more careful, choosing someone they truly like. Otherwise, how could they spend eternity with them? You're right. It was a valid and convincing argument. Ren had no way to refute her point, because it was true. For immortals, it wasn't just a matter of convenience. Only by confirming their feelings would they be able to walk that long road together. Ren gained a deeper understanding of the girl's feelings for him. He realized that he needed to take their love more seriously. So, Ren, you can take your time to understand the girl's sincerity and why she loves you. Then give your answer. But if it's Shinomiya, I think she is being genuine. Otherwise, she wouldn't have lost control when she confessed. Ren carefully listened to Ran's advice. Indeed, her words carried weight. Girls had better intuition when it came to matters of the heart. And he agreed with her. He would first understand why the other person liked him and only then respond accordingly. It just meant his original plan might be delayed a bit. But that wasn't a big issue. After all, advancing in the apprentice pathway wasn't easy either. Maybe his diary would surprise him again. So, instead of worrying about the future, it was more important to deal with what was right in front of him. Chapter 187, What happened during the fainting? It was evening. Due to the incident earlier that afternoon, the three who had been inside the alternate dimension slept through most of the day before finally waking up. Ugh. My head hurts. Kaguya sat up groggily from the bed, still feeling a sharp headache. The dizziness that followed made her nauseous and on the verge of throwing up. She subconsciously glanced toward the window. Outside, the sun was just setting over the ocean. I remember. Ah. Kaguya vaguely recalled that they were testing the alternate dimension. But the moment she tried to focus on those memories, a fresh wave of pain surged through her head. Hayasaka. Where are you, Hayasaka? She instinctively called out to her maid. Miss Kaguya? As she called, Hayasaka, who was sleeping beside her, slowly opened her eyes. Hayasaka? Still dazed, Kaguya looked around. She noticed Hayasaka, who was sitting up in bed wearing only her underwear. Unlike Kaguya, who preferred pure white undergarments, Hayasaka's taste leaned toward bolder styles. Black and purple, more mature and elegant. Miss Kaguya? Hayasaka's eyes were still unfocused, but as a professional maid, she quickly adjusted her state. Within moments, the confusion in her gaze cleared, and she began observing the situation. She glanced at the still dazed Kaguya, who hadn't realized she was only in her underwear. And of course, Hayasaka herself was also in the same state. Her attention then turned to the bed. Aside from her and Kaguya, someone else was lying there. It was none other than Chika, the one who always found ways to defy expectations. I can't eat anymore. With puffed cheeks and a dreamy tone, Chika murmured in her sleep, clearly in the middle of a food fantasy. It was obvious something had gone wrong during the test. There was no need to further examine the room. Hayasaka already recognized it. It was the room she shared with Miss Kaguya. She raised her hand and made a gesture to open a door in space. A spatial door appeared. But immediately, a sharp pain struck her head. The moment she closed the spatial door, the pain subsided. That was enough for Hayasaka to confirm the issue. Ms. Kaguya's release had gone too far, causing the alternate dimension to surpass its limit and begin collapsing. As expected, the dimension created by the door fruit had its limitations. Taking a deep breath, Hayasaka decisively got out of bed. She passed by the still dreaming Chika, walked to the closet, and retrieved an appropriate maid outfit to put on. After quickly tidying herself up, she looked like her usual capable self. She then turned to the still confused Kaguya and gave a slight bow. I'll go check on the situation first. But I suggest you pay attention to your appearance. If Amamiya comes in like this, he won't even know where to look. Kaguya instantly understood what Hayasaka meant. She looked down and realized she was only in her underwear. Panicking, she pulled the quilt up over herself. Morning. Hayasaka, what happened? Miss Kaguya, we were brought back after we lost consciousness. Then, what about our clothes? Looking at Kaguya's hopeful yet nervous expression, Hayasaka inwardly sighed at her wanting to have it both ways. Please don't expect too much, Ms. Kaguya. Everyone here is a girl except for Amamiya. And he definitely wasn't the one who undressed us. Also, think about it, Miss Fujiwara and I were both sleeping in the same bed. Do you think Amamiya would have helped all three of us change clothes? Is that what you want? Hayasaka's direct words immediately snapped Kaguya out of her shyness and nervous daydream. While she had felt a little flutter at the thought of Ren seeing her, the idea of him undressing Hayasaka and Fujiwara was unacceptable. Did something go wrong during the test? Now that her mind had cleared, Kaguya quickly grasped the situation. Most likely, the dimension couldn't handle the full release of your power. We'll need to verify the specifics, but that should be the general cause. Hayasaka agreed with this assessment. Miss Kaguya, I'll head outside to check on things first. Alright, I'll leave it to you, Hayasaka. Hayasaka gave a polite bow, exited the room, and headed for the security room. Miss. The security personnel stationed there, all from the Hayasaka family, immediately stood up and saluted respectfully upon seeing her. No need for all that. You all know the rules here. If you're aware of something, just keep it to yourselves. The security captain quickly stepped forward. Of course, of course. We understand the rules, miss. Knowing a little could sometimes strengthen trust even more. The future of the Hayasaka family was bright and Kaguya was its greatest support. This was something everyone present understood well. Especially after witnessing that awe-inspiring scene earlier, they understood clearly, strength was everything. Wealth and status were secondary. Their eldest daughter and Kaguya were destined to form a powerful alliance.